My mom, with a baffling audacity, expects me not only to forgive the man who subjected me to an unspeakable trauma, but also to readily permit him unsupervised access to both myself and my precious child. How could a mother even conceive of such a request, much less voice it with apparent seriousness? It felt like a betrayal cutting deeper than the original wound, a chilling testament to her skewed priorities. The man in question, Jack, was my husband's best friend, and he assaulted me when I was a vulnerable 16. The memory still claws at the edges of my consciousness, a persistent phantom limb pain. Yet, this wasn't even the cruelest twist of fate. You see, my mother had always held a subtle disdain for my now husband, viewing him as somehow beneath us. Jack, on the other hand, was her darling. He hailed from a prominent family, his name synonymous with an unblemished reputation, and my mother simply adored him, blind to any possible flaw. So when Jack had his way with me, in that horrific, life-altering moment, and I, a shattered 16-year-old, finally mustered the courage to tell her, my mother's response was a crushing disbelief. Her eyes, usually so soft, hardened into a wall of skepticism, impervious to my pleas and raw tears. It was as if my truth was an inconvenient stain on the pristine reputation of the family she admired. To add an excruciating layer of salt to the already gaping wound, Jack's mother also happened to be my mother's employer, a powerful figure in her professional life. I instinctively understood that this precarious power dynamic played a colossal role in my mother's immediate and wavering dismissal of my account. Despite the immense pressure and the agonizing fear of further isolation, I adamantly refused to be silenced, refusing to let my pain be swept under the rug of familial convenience. Consequently, driven by a desperate need for justice and truth, I went to the authorities, a defiant act undertaken despite my mother's tearful, frantic pleas begging me not to disrupt the delicate balance of their social standing. The atmosphere at home became unbearable, thick with her palpable hostility and silent accusations. As I awaited the daunting prospect of a trial, I sought refuge, moving in with my then-boyfriend, now my steadfast husband, and his wonderfully supportive parents. The sanctuary they offered was a lifeline, a much-needed escape from the venomous environment my own home had become. However, just when I thought I had found a modicum of stability, another devastating blow struck. While living at my boyfriend's, a discovery sent my world spiraling once more. I was pregnant. The sickening realization dawned on me immediately that it couldn't possibly be my boyfriend's. We had never been intimate, nor had I ever been with anyone in that way prior to the assault. The paternity was a chilling, undeniable truth, a constant, living reminder of the trauma. 5 agonizing months later, the trial finally concluded. Jack, confronted with irrefutable evidence, admitted to the charges. Yet, in a bitter pill for me to swallow, he managed to secure a plea deal, which shockingly resulted in no jail time for him. The only solitary caveat, a thin thread of justice, was a court order stipulating that he was forever stripped of the right to ever see my daughter. 9 months after that, she was born, a beautiful, innocent life. And on that very day, as if on cue, my mother, displaying a sudden and carefully constructed contrition, asked me to move back home, offering a belated, carefully worded apology for everything she did. An instinctive alarm bell rang in my mind, a fishy feeling as I described it, but she was my mother, and the profound, enduring longing for a maternal connection swayed me. I made the fateful decision to forgive her. It was, in hindsight, a monumental mistake, though its true nature wasn't immediately apparent. The first year of our renewed cohabitation was surprisingly peaceful, almost idyllic. My mother, in a meticulously crafted performance, seemed genuinely remorseful, transforming into the quintessential doting grandmother. She'd apologize frequently, cook us elaborate dinners, and shower my daughter with affection, truly the works. It was a carefully constructed facade of reconciliation, and for a brief, hopeful period, I allowed myself to believe in it. But then, precisely 1 year later, that fragile piece shattered. Not because my mother had fundamentally changed, but because I, pursuing a semblance of normalcy, had enrolled in college a few hours away. To facilitate my studies, my mother had conveniently retired early, ostensibly to care for my daughter while I was away. I typically stayed on campus during the week, returning home only on weekends. Well, one fateful day, a colossal snowstorm descended, effectively canceling my Thursday and Friday classes. Seizing the unexpected opportunity, I decided to head home early, planning to surprise my mother. What an utterly naive, devastating intention that turned out to be. The moment I pushed open the kitchen door, the innocuous surprise I had planned morphed into a scene of unspeakable horror, freezing me in my tracks. And guess who I found casually gathered there? Not just my mom, but Jack's mother, and worse, Jack himself. And there he was, the man who had torn my world apart, comfortably holding Emma, my daughter, in his arms. The air in the room instantly thickened with the shock of my unexpected arrival. Their faces, caught off guard, wore a kaleidoscope of guilt and alarm. The sight sent a primal rage coursing through me, and I utterly flipped out. Adrenaline surged, propelling me forward to snatch my daughter from his grasp. With trembling, furious hands, I began frantically packing a bag with Emma's essentials, my sole focus on an escape. My mother and Jack's mother, their faces etched with desperation, started pleading with me, their voices rising in a frantic chorus, begging me not to leave, not to break this horrifying charade. As I moved toward the door, my mother's pleas escalated into wrenching sobs, her desperate cries now aimed squarely at my forgiveness. But the word tasted like ash in my mouth. "I will never forgive you," I declared, my voice trembling with a mixture of grief and unyielding resolve, and turned to walk out. It was then, in that profoundly vulnerable moment, that Jack, the very man who had assaulted me, had the audacity to grab my arm. "You should be nicer to your mother," he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. The sheer gall, the utter brazenness of his words, was a fresh violation, a sickening echo of his past cruelty. For weeks, my mother's name flashed relentlessly on my phone screen, hundreds of calls, each one ignored. I remained resolute, severing all contact. My husband and I quickly secured an apartment, creating a safe haven for our daughter and ourselves, and I arranged for a reliable babysitter to care for Emma during my college classes. A mere week after that traumatic incident, my mother, in a desperate, misguided attempt to buy my silence, or perhaps my affections, transferred over $100,000 into my bank account. The gesture felt hollow, manipulative, and I couldn't even begin to fathom where she had acquired such a sum. Years passed, a decade, marked by a profound, echoing silence between my mother and me. The silence was finally, reluctantly broken at my younger sister's wedding. Forced by circumstance into an interaction with my mother, I maintained a fragile veneer of civility as she, feigning a grandmother's concern, inquired about Emma, whom she hadn't seen in 10 long years. She also asked about my son, Tyler, a child she knew nothing about, and even probed about my current pregnancy. Her tone, meticulously crafted, spoke of regret. She expressed a manufactured desire to fix things and to see her grandchildren before she eventually dies, a thinly veiled appeal to sentimentality. In a stunning revision of history, she even claimed she had always believed me about the assault, but her supposed fear of being fired had tragically prevented her from showing it. How convenient, how self-serving. When I coolly inquired if she still socialized with Jack's mother, she hesitated, then admitted to seeing her sometimes, quickly adding, but mostly at church. The conversation, for me, ended there abruptly and with a searing clarity. My anger, a smoldering ember for years, flared into an inferno. Not only had she shamelessly allowed Jack, my assaulter, into my daughter's life, but she continued to associate with his mother, the very woman who had maliciously gone around town, spreading vile rumors. Jack's mother had painted me as a manipulative liar, fabricating the assault, claiming instead that Jack and I had consensually slept together. She had even insinuated that I, plagued by guilt over this alleged consensual encounter, had then deliberately lied by claiming an assault. To think my own mother maintained a friendship with such a venomous individual, a purveyor of such grotesque slander, was unfathomable, a fresh, painful stab to my heart. When I finally arrived home that day, I was absolutely furious, utterly mad off as I would describe it, needing desperately to cool down before my emotions consumed me. I spent the entire night wrestling with these new revelations, tossing and turning as I replayed the conversation, the accusations, and the bitter history. By morning, a decision, cold and clear, had solidified. I would call my mother, for the first time in a decade. I wanted to talk to her, to lay bare the unresolved issues, to genuinely explore if we could, against all odds, move forward from the abyss of our past, and if I could, in some miraculous way, truly forgive her. The conversation began tentatively, surprisingly well. We exchanged pleasantries, discussing surface-level current things in our lives, a fragile illusion of normalcy. But then, as if drawn by an irresistible, destructive force, the discussion veered towards church, and from church, it inevitably, sickeningly, turned to Jack. My mother, with an alarming lack of self-awareness, felt compelled to inform me how much my daughter looked like his other kids, as if this profoundly painful and inappropriate comparison was something I was supposed to care about. A twisted bond I should acknowledge, I instantly, sharply, told her I had no desire to discuss him. But she, utterly oblivious, or perhaps deliberately dismissive, pressed on. She launched into a carefully rehearsed monologue about how he was a better person now, how he feels terrible for what he did, and how I should forgive him because it happened so long ago. The cruelest blow, however, was her flippant declaration, "You should be over it by now." A cold, unyielding fury settled over me. How dared she? It became brutally clear in that moment that my mother had never truly listened to my account of what happened, not from my lips, not from my heart. She had only ever absorbed his version of events, the sanitized, self-serving narrative. So, in a torrent of raw, unvarnished truth, I finally told her what happened, what really happened. I made it unequivocally clear that her continued reverence for, and discussion of, the man who had violated me would leave me with absolutely zero respect for her. With a voice that shook despite my resolve, I told her to never call me again, to allow our relationship to remain precisely as it had been for the last decade, a vast, echoing void. Because, I concluded with a chilling certainty, she was never going to change. My final, unshakable boundary was drawn. I would never, under any circumstances, allow any of my children to be near her, because I simply could not trust her to protect them. My hands were shaking uncontrollably as I finally hung up the phone, the receiver heavy in my grasp. I walked, my legs feeling strangely detached, to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, seeking a moment of cold, cleansing silence. Of water, its coolness a fleeting bomb against the inferno of emotions raging within me. I lifted it to my parched lips, the rhythmic clink of ice against glass doing little to steady the erratic beat of my own heart, which hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Each ragged breath felt shallow, utterly failing to fill my lungs with the calm I desperately sought. Across the polished surface of the dining table, where his open laptop hummed softly, my husband's gaze met mine. The easy focus he'd had on his work moments before evaporated, replaced by a deep furrow between his brows and a tightening around his eyes, a silent testament to the concern already etching itself deeply across his usually serene face. He didn't even need to close the lid to know something was profoundly wrong. The air around me crackled with unspoken distress, a tangible storm visible in my hunched shoulders and clenched jaw. There was no need for him to utter the question, "What happened?" For the answer, a kaleidoscope of hurt, anger, and betrayal was surely written all over me. A screaming headline he couldn't possibly ignore. I practically collapsed rather than sat heavily into the chair directly opposite him, the wooden frame groaning in protest. The glass, now half empty, still trembled precariously in my hand, a physical manifestation of my internal tremors. But the chilled water offered no true solace, for the venomous echo of my mother's words continued to replay, a relentless, torturous loop inside my skull. "You should be over it by now," she'd casually, almost dismissively, suggested, her tone implying that grief was a temporary inconvenience, a phase to be grown out of, like an old habit. Her utter lack of empathy was a blunt instrument striking repeatedly at an open wound, making it throb with renewed pain. My stomach, already a knot of anxiety, churned violently, a sickening lurch accompanying the thought of her subsequent, almost flippant, mention of Jack's other children. How could she even conceive of comparing them to Emma, my precious Emma? As if such a juxtaposition was somehow normal, or worse, somehow acceptable, a legitimate metric for gauging Emma's worth or impact. The very idea was an insidious poison. My husband, with an instinct refined by years of quiet understanding, recognized the precipice I stood upon. He closed his laptop with a gentle click, the sound sharp in the sudden quiet, and reached across the table, his warm hand settling protectively over mine. But even his comforting touch, usually an anchor, felt suffocating in that moment. I recoiled, pulling my hand away as it burned, and stood up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. I couldn't sit still. A volatile cocktail of anger and raw energy surged through every vein, demanding an outlet, a physical manifestation. I needed to move, to channel this tempest within me, to do something. I began pacing the kitchen, a restless panther caged by invisible bars, my frantic footsteps echoing starkly on the cold, unforgiving tile floor. Each reverberation a tiny hammer blow against my frayed nerves. Suddenly, the insistent ding-dong of the doorbell sliced through the tense silence, a jarring intrusion that snapped me out of my spiraling thoughts. I froze instantly, every muscle tensing, my senses on high alert. We weren't expecting anyone, certainly not at this hour. Who could it be? A cold dread seeped into my bones. My husband, sensing my immediate unease, rose with quiet determination to answer it. I remained rooted in the kitchen, a silent sentinel, straining to catch any sound, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I heard the distinct creak of the front door opening, followed by a hushed exchange, then the subtle, almost furtive, sound of rustling paper. Moments later, he reappeared, carrying a small, unassuming package. It was addressed to Emma. "There's no return address," he stated, his voice low, his brow furrowed as he turned the box over in his hands, examining it for any clue, any identifying mark. Something cold, far colder than the water I'd just drunk, settled deep in my stomach, a premonition of unease. I took the package from him, my fingers brushing against the surprisingly smooth, flecked surface of the wrapping. It was enclosed in a cheerful, almost aggressively pink paper, adorned with a perfectly tied satin bow on top, undeniably, overtly, designed to appeal to a young girl. My fingers tightened around the box, the cheerful presentation doing nothing to quell the surge of suspicion that crept through me like a tendril of smoke. This felt wrong, deeply, unsettlingly wrong. I snatched a sharp knife from the kitchen drawer, the cold steel a stark contrast to the soft paper, and carefully, meticulously, cut through the tape. Inside, nestled amongst tissue paper, lay a delicate silver necklace, its heart pendant glinting innocently under the kitchen lights. Tacked beside it was a small, cream-colored note, its message chillingly simple. "For Emma from someone who cares." My hands, which had just steadied, began shaking again. But this time it was with a different, far more insidious kind of fear that tasted of invasion, of unseen eyes. I showed the cryptic note to my husband, watching the subtle but undeniable tightening of his jaw as his eyes quickly scanned the few words. His expression hardened, shifting from curiosity to a focused, grim resolve. Without a single word needing to be exchanged, a silent, mutual understanding passed between us. I walked directly to the garbage can, its dark interior a silent accomplice, and dropped the entire package inside necklace, note, pink paper, bow, everything. My husband gave a slow, deliberate nod in agreement, his silence a powerful affirmation. We both knew, with chilling certainty, that we couldn't possibly tell Emma about this. Not yet. Not ever, if we could help it. She was at school, likely immersed in her lessons, blissfully, agonizingly unaware that someone out there was trying to send her gifts. Insidious gifts that felt less like generosity and more like a probe, a test, a prelude. Over the next few days, the disturbing pattern escalated. More packages arrived, each one a fresh assault on our sense of security. A delicate bracelet appeared one afternoon, then a heavy, illustrated book about family trees the next, followed by a pristine photo album, its blank pages a chilling invitation. Each meticulously chosen item, carefully wrapped and anonymously delivered, went straight into the trash, a silent, desperate effort to shield Emma from this increasingly unsettling intrusion. She remained oblivious, and for that, I was fiercely grateful. My vigilance intensified to an obsessive degree. I started checking the mail religiously, intercepting anything suspicious before she could possibly lay eyes on it, my heart pounding with each rustle of envelopes. Our home, once a sanctuary, now felt porous, vulnerable. Then one afternoon, a new, even more insidious breach occurred. Emma came home from school with an unusual, almost buoyant, bounce in her step, her usual post-school lethargy completely absent. She practically flung her backpack by the door, its bed echoing slightly, and practically skipped into the kitchen where I was mindlessly preparing dinner. Her cheerful demeanor a stark contrast to my internal turmoil. "Mom, I made a new friend online," she announced, her voice bubbling with unadulterated excitement as she pulled out her phone, its screen glowing brightly. My knife paused mid-chop, frozen in the air above the vegetables. A cold dread, far worse than the previous fear, coiled itself in my gut, alarm bells shrieking deafeningly in my head. "Oh, tell me about them," I managed to say, forcing my voice to maintain a casual, almost indifferent tone, desperate not to betray the sudden panic gripping me. "His name is Sebastian," Emma chirped, already scrolling through a flurry of messages on her phone. "He knows so much about our family. He told me things about Grandma that even you probably don't know." The knife, which had been loosely held, slipped from my suddenly numb fingers, clattering with a metallic clang onto the cutting board, the sound sharp and ominous in the suddenly silent kitchen. I pivoted sharply to face Emma fully, my heart now a runaway train, hammering against my ribs with an urgency that stole my breath. "What kind of things?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady, praying it didn't crack under the immense pressure. Emma, oblivious to the terror mounting in my eyes, merely shrugged, her attention still fixed on her phone. "Just stuff about when she was younger, where she worked, things like that. He says he's doing genealogy research and found our family really interesting." My vision narrowed, focusing solely on her phone. With deliberate, almost robotic movements, I walked over and gently, but firmly, took the phone from her unsuspecting hands. "Honey, can I see these messages?" Emma looked up, her expression a mix of confusion and mild annoyance at my sudden intensity, but she handed it over without further protest. As I scrolled through the seemingly innocuous conversation, my blood ran absolutely cold. The messages were carefully crafted, overtly friendly, almost charmingly so. But nestled within them were detailed, minute, intimate details that only someone incredibly close to our family, someone with deeply personal knowledge, would ever know. There were specifics about my mother's old job, a role she'd held decades ago, details about the obscure, small town we used to live in when I was a child, and even mentions of family members I had never, ever, spoken to Emma about. This wasn't just genealogy research, this was a chilling, calculated invasion. "Emma," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, laced with an urgency that finally registered with her, "I need you to block this person right now." Her face crumpled, confusion quickly morphing into hurt and a flicker of defiance. "But Mom, why? He's just being friendly," she protested, her voice wavering. "Please, just do it," I insisted, my voice sharper, more clipped than I intended, the panic now fully erupting. Emma's face fell further, a shadow of adolescent resentment crossing her features. But to her credit, she did as I asked, navigating her phone to block the account, effectively severing the connection. I pulled her into a tight, desperate hug, burying my face in her hair, trying to calm not only her sudden distress, but, more importantly, the frantic, racing thoughts that threatened to overwhelm me. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," I murmured, my voice thick with emotion. "I just want you to be safe online. You can't trust people you don't know in real life. There are dangers out there, hidden in plain sight." That evening, a suffocating silence hung heavy in the house after Emma had finally gone to bed, her quiet sobbing having finally faded into sleep. I knew what I had to do. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, her voice tinged with surprise, almost hope, to hear from me again so soon after our last strained conversation. "I thought you said never to call you," she said, a fragile flicker of expectation in her tone. "Did you give someone Evan's information?" I demanded, abandoning all pretensive pleasantries, my voice raw, devoid of warmth. There was a beat of stunned silence on the other end, a pause that stretched tautly, heavy with unspoken implications. "What are you talking about?" she finally stammered, her voice thin, feigning ignorance. "Someone's been sending gifts to Emma, anonymous packages, for days. And now she's getting messages online from someone who knows way too much about our family. Did you tell someone where we live? Did you give them any details?" I pressed, my questions like verbal battering rams. I don't know what you're talking about," my mother stammered again, but something in her voice didn't ring true, a subtle tremor, a forced lightness that only amplified my suspicions. "Mom," I warned, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "I swear, if you had anything to do with this." "Did Emma like the gifts?" she blurted out suddenly, a question that hung in the air like a guilty confession, then immediately tried to backtrack, her voice a jumble of poorly disguised panic. "I mean, if someone sent her gifts, did she see them?" My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles went white, blood draining from them. My vision blurred slightly with incandescent rage. "You knew about the gift," I said, my voice deadly quiet, each word a slow, deliberate drop of acid. "You knew, and you didn't think to warn me?" Didn't think to tell me that someone was attempting to make contact with my daughter in such an unsettling, clandestine way. Her attempt at an explanation was feeble, a desperate flail. I just thought maybe if she got to know him a little, through nice gestures. I hung up before she could finish, the sharp click of the disconnect a final, definitive period on our fractured relationship. My whole body was shaking, not with fear this time, but with an uncontrolled, visceral rage that threatened to consume me. I immediately went to our computer, my fingers flying across the keyboard with renewed purpose. Every online password, every privacy setting, every conceivable digital vulnerability I could think of became a target for immediate change. My husband, ever my silent partner in crisis, joined me, both of us working in an intense, grim silence. The only sounds the rapid clicks of keys and the whirring of the hard drive. A desperate attempt to build a digital fortress around our daughter. The next few weeks were an unceasing nightmare of vigilance, a relentless campaign against the unseen. I drove Emma to and from school every single day, the idea of her walking with friends, once a normal joy, now an unbearable risk. No more independent journeys, no more casual strolls. I attended every single school event, my eyes constantly scanning the crowds, searching for a face that seemed out of place, a lingering gaze, a shadow that felt too long. My senses heightened to an excruciating degree. Every stranger was a potential threat, every fleeting glance a source of suspicion, every moment away from Emma a terrifying vacuum of uncertainty. I had spent countless anxious hours, my gaze ceaselessly sweeping over faces in any gathering, my heart leaping into my throat at the slightest resemblance, searching for any fleeting sign of Jack. The air itself often felt thick with dread, a constant, low hum of impending menace. Then, the inevitable happened, a moment seared into my memory with icy clarity. It was during Emma's vibrant spring concert, a joyous occasion that was swiftly poisoned by his presence. He stood far at the back of the auditorium, a shadowy figure partially obscured by a massive stone pillar. Yet, even through the dim lighting and the distance, I recognized him instantly, a visceral jolt of recognition that bypassed my conscious thought. There was no mistaking that familiar, unsettling build, the way his shoulders slumped just so. The infuriatingly casual posture with his hands perpetually tucked into his pockets, a stance that once signified comfort but now screamed menace. My blood, quite literally, turned to ice in my veins as I watched him. He wasn't looking at the crowd, or at the vibrant stage where children performed. His gaze was fixed, predatory, on the spot where Emma would soon step into the spotlight. A silent scream tore through me. How dare he invade this sacred space, this moment of pure, innocent joy? I managed a choked whisper to my husband, a barely audible plea for action. Without a word, understanding the gravity in my eyes, he immediately rose from his seat, his stride purposeful as he moved towards the back. But by the time he reached the looming pillar, the space behind it was empty, a chilling testament to Jack's phantom-like ability to vanish. He was gone, leaving behind only a lingering chill in the air and a fresh wave of terror in my heart. We stayed for Emma's performance, a hollow shell of an audience, but her beautiful, soaring voice, usually a balm to my soul, was lost to me. My eyes, betraying my deep-seated fear, incessantly scanned the emergency exits, darted into the deepest shadows, searching every conceivable hiding spot where he might be lurking. A predator in plain sight. This sickening pattern, a cruel game of cat and mouse, continued for weeks, each day eroding a little more of my sanity. Jack, with a calculated precision that bespoke pure malice, would consistently appear at the very edges of Emma's activities, hovering near the sidelines of her soccer games, materializing in the shadows outside her school plays, or even making a fleeting appearance outside the grocery store when we were just trying to manage our mundane errands. He was always just visible enough for me to spot him, a constant, unsettling reminder of his presence, yet always maintaining a meticulously safe distance. Never quite close enough to transgress any legal boundaries. He was playing a truly sick psychological game, and I could feel my mind fraying, peace becoming a distant, forgotten dream. Was nowhere truly safe from his insidious gaze. Finally, the relentless pressure became unbearable. I simply couldn't endure it any longer. One evening, I made a decisive, desperate choice. Leaving Emma safely with my husband, I drove directly to Jack's house. I had unearthed his address through a public records search, my hands trembling uncontrollably as my fingers hesitated over the keyboard, typing his name into the search bar. Each keystroke a defiant act against the fear that threatened to consume me. His house was a modest, well-kept dwelling, almost deceptively normal, with an array of brightly colored children's toys scattered haphazardly across the front lawn. The sight of those innocent playthings, lying there in stark contrast to the darkness Jack embodied, twisted my stomach into a knot of nausea. I rang the doorbell, the chime echoing the frantic beat of my own heart, and waited. When Jack opened the door, his face was disturbingly impassive, devoid of any surprise. It was clear, with a chilling certainty, that he had been expecting me, anticipating this very confrontation. "Leave my family alone," I stated, my voice rigid with a forced calm, discarding any pretense of polite introduction. "Stop sending those manipulative gifts. Stop showing up at Emma's school, polluting her safe haven. And absolutely stop trying to contact her online, you insidious creep." Jack, infuriatingly, simply leaned against the door frame, a small, knowing smile playing at the corners of his lips. A predatory glimmer in his eyes, his nonchalance was a deliberate provocation. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice maddeningly calm, a stark contrast to the tempest raging within me. "I'm just a concerned father who wants to know his daughter, to be a part of her life." The words were a knife twist. She is not your daughter, I spat, the venom in my voice barely contained. You forfeited any and all rights to her the day you admitted what you did to me, the day you shattered my world. His smug smile faded, ever so slightly, a fleeting moment of vulnerability. Legal rights can be challenged, he stated quietly, his tone now laced with a cold, calculated threat. Especially when the mother is clearly unstable, prone to cutting off family members. Pathologically paranoid about innocent gestures like gifts from a loving relative. How dare he twist my justified fear into a diagnosis of instability? Are you threatening me? I demanded, my voice trembling now, not with fear, but with an incandescent rage that shook my very core. I'm just saying, Jack continued, his voice remaining infuriatingly serene, that courts tend to favor reformed individuals who paid their debt to society. Especially when they can prove the other parent is alienating the child from their biological family, actively obstructing their relationship. It was a declaration of war. Meticulously planned and chillingly delivered. I spun on my heel and walked away, every fiber of my being screaming at me to do something I would undoubtedly regret. But his words, those meticulously chosen, venomous phrases, echoed relentlessly in my mind all the way home, a horrifying mantra of his insidious intention. That very night, a new resolve solidified within me. The time for cowering was over. I began to meticulously document everything. Every fleeting sighting, no matter how brief. Every unsolicited, manipulative gift, before it could be discarded. Every attempt he made at contact, whether subtle or overt. I took screenshots of his online messages, cataloging his digital footprints. I photographed the packages he sent, sterile evidence of his persistence, before tossing them into the trash. I created a detailed, chronological timeline of his stalking behavior, transforming myself from a victim into an investigator, armed with facts. My husband, bless his steady resolve, suggested we immediately go to the police. But I knew, with a chilling certainty, that in the eyes of the law, my word against Jack's calculated lies would not be enough. So we installed state-of-the-art security cameras around every vulnerable corner of our house, transforming our home into a veritable fortress. Dash cams were strategically placed in our cars, recording every journey. And as a final, defiant act, I began carrying a discreet voice recorder in my purse, a silent witness to every interaction. If Jack wanted to play legal games, if he sought to twist the truth, I would be ready. I would be armed with irrefutable proof. The situation, predictably, escalated, piercing the fragile shield I tried to maintain around Emma. One afternoon, she came home from school, her small frame racked with sobs, tears streaming down her face like twin rivers of heartbreak. Some cruel kids, clearly manipulated by Jack's poison, had been saying truly mean things about me, calling me a liar, painting me as the villain who had ruined a good man's life. The insidious rumors were spreading through the school like wildfire, consuming innocent minds. And I knew with sickening certainty exactly who had lit the match. My protective instinct surged, a white-hot fury displacing all fear. I immediately called an emergency meeting with Emma's principal and her teachers. Sitting in that sterile conference room, the air thick with unspoken tension, I laid out the harrowing situation as calmly and rationally as my trembling voice would allow, explaining the history of our entanglement with Jack without delving into the traumatic, graphic details that would only serve to upset them further. The principal, Mrs. Catherine, a woman usually composed and unflappable, listened with a visibly growing concern etched onto her face, her brows furrowed in disbelief. We've actually had a man asking questions about Emma, her teacher confessed slowly, her voice tinged with unease. He claimed to be a family friend, planning a surprise for her birthday. We didn't give him any information, of course, she quickly added, but it was certainly unsettling. It was the chilling confirmation I feared. He had infiltrated her school. He was everywhere. I immediately provided them with Jack's photo and a copy of the restraining order I had already initiated the legal process for. They promised to significantly increase security around the school perimeter and to notify me immediately if he dared to appear again. But a cold dread settled in my stomach. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this was not enough. I needed to do more. That very weekend, driven by a fierce determination, I organized a community gathering at our local park. I had lived in this neighborhood for 5 years, meticulously cultivating genuine relationships with our neighbors, actively engaging in community events, becoming a trusted, integral part of this vibrant tapestry of lives. These were people who knew me, who trusted my character, who had seen me raise my children with love and dedication. It was time, I realized, to seize control of the narrative, to inoculate our community before Jack's insidious poison could spread further, twisting perceptions and sowing discord. Standing before the gathered crowd, familiar faces of neighbors, Emma's friends and their parents, even local business owners, I took a deep, fortifying breath, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, and began to speak. I deliberately avoided graphic, traumatizing details, but I explained, with a raw honesty that resonated deeply, that someone from my past who had deeply hurt me was now relentlessly attempting to insert himself into my daughter's life, subtly, insidiously. I appealed to their collective humanity, asking for their unwavering support in keeping all our children safe and urging them to be extra vigilant about strangers asking questions. However innocuous they might seem, the response was nothing short of overwhelming, a tidal wave of solidarity that brought tears to my eyes. Parents shared their own heart-wrenching stories of protecting their children, offered to help with school pickup routines, and promised, without hesitation, to keep a watchful eye out for anything suspicious. Mrs. Jones from down the street, whose daughter was Emma's best friend and a constant presence in our lives, pulled me aside afterward, her hand gripping my arm firmly. "We've got your back," she declared, her voice resonating with an unshakable resolve. "Anyone tries to spread lies about you in this neighborhood, they'll have to go through all of us first. We won't stand for it." It was a powerful, comforting affirmation that I was not alone in this fight. But Jack, predictably, was far from done. His malevolence knew no bounds. Just 2 short weeks later, the terrifying proof of his escalation arrived in the form of legal papers, cold and official. My own mother, in an act of betrayal that cleaved my soul, had conspired with Jack. Together, they had filed a petition with Child Protective Services, making the utterly heinous claim that I was neglecting Emma's emotional needs by cruelly denying her access to her biological family. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. A punch to the gut that stole my breath and left me reeling. How could my own mother do this? How could she join forces with my abuser against her own granddaughter? My husband, his face a mask of shocked fury, immediately sprang into action, calling our lawyer. I, however, remained rooted to the kitchen table, staring at those damning papers in utter disbelief, the words blurring through a haze of inched hairs. The thought of my own mother, the woman who brought me into this world, actively conspiring with my attacker to try and rip my daughter away from me, this betrayal cut deeper, far deeper, than any wound she had inflicted before. It was a shattering of the most fundamental bond. The next few months blurred into an agonizing odyssey of legal preparations, a relentless scramble to gather every shred of counter-evidence, all while desperately attempting to maintain some semblance of normalcy for Emma and our youngest son, Tyler. We meticulously shielded Emma from the grim realities of the looming legal battle, but children, with their uncanny intuition, always sense when something is amiss. She had become more withdrawn, more prone to quiet moments of contemplation, a shadow of unspoken worrying subtly altering her bright, innocent demeanor. Emma had become markedly quieter, her usual vivaciousness replaced by a subdued stillness that was deeply unsettling. A palpable anxiety seemed to cling to her, manifesting in her constantly seeking my presence, her small hands often finding mine, a desperate, almost primal clinging she hadn't exhibited since her toddler years. The weight of the impending legal battle was clearly settling upon her innocent shoulders. The dreaded court date finally arrived on a particularly gray Tuesday morning, the overcast sky mirroring the somber mood that had taken root in our home. I dressed with meticulous care, each movement deliberate, choosing a dark, conservatively cut suit made of a substantial wool blend. It was a strategic decision, an attempt to project an image of unwavering responsibility and unshakable stability, hoping to counteract any perception of emotional fragility. As we approached the imposing stone facade of the courthouse, my husband's fingers laced tightly with mine, offering a silent anchor in the churning sea of my apprehension. Our lawyer, Sub, a man whose calm demeanor belied his sharp legal mind, was already there. His arms laden with several sturdy cardboard boxes overflowing with documents, a tangible representation of the mountain of evidence we had amassed. The courtroom itself was surprisingly compact, a stark contrast to the grand, imposing halls I'd envisioned from television dramas. Its intimate scale somehow amplified the suffocating tension. At the plaintiff's table, Jack was already seated, flanked by his own counsel, and chillingly, my mother, a rigid figure, sat directly beside him. Her gaze remained stubbornly fixed forward, refusing to acknowledge my presence, a silent testament to the chasm that had opened between us. Jack, however, harbored no such reservations. His eyes, devoid of any warmth, bore into me with an unsettling intensity, a relentless, predatory stare that sent a shiver of ice crawling down my spine. A hush fell over the room as the judge entered, her presence commanding immediate respect. We all rose in unison, a ripple of nervous energy passing through me. My legs, despite my attempts to project composure, felt like fragile reeds, barely capable of supporting me as I watched her settle into her elevated seat. In that moment, she was more than just a judicial figure. She was the arbiter of our fate, the keeper of our family's future, holding it delicately, precariously, in the balance of her decisions. The proceedings commenced with a calculated precision as Jack's lawyer, a man with an unctuous smile and a deceptively mild voice, began to lay out their case. He meticulously constructed a narrative designed to systematically dismantle my character, portraying me as an emotionally unstable and irrationally paranoid mother. He claimed I had ruthlessly severed vital family ties, deliberately isolating Emma from her rightful heritage and the love of her paternal relatives. Each accusation felt like a personal assault, an insidious whisper aimed directly at my core. I found myself gripping the edge of the polished wooden table, knuckles white, as they presented their carefully curated evidence. This included seemingly innocuous photos of me participating in a lively community gathering. Images they sensationally twisted and reinterpreted as irrefutable proof of my so-called paranoid and erratic behavior, implying that my attempts to foster connections outside of Jack's family were somehow suspect. Furthermore, they played poignant audio recordings of my mother, her voice choked with what sounded like genuine anguish, tearfully recounting how I had allegedly denied her precious access to her own grandchildren. To bolster their case, they even paraded a series of character witnesses from Jack's church, individuals who, with earnest sincerity, testified to his purported spiritual transformation and his newfound, unwavering dedication to his family, painting him as a redeemed man desperate only for connection. Finally, it was our turn. Sub, with a quiet confidence that was a stark contrast to the plaintiff's theatrics, methodically began to dismantle their manufactured narrative. He laid out our counter-evidence with painstaking precision, each piece fitting into a chilling mosaic of harassment, He presented a meticulously compiled timeline of the increasingly disturbing stalking incidents, detailing dates and occurrences, leaving no room for doubt. Then came the anonymous packages, not just vague mentions, but specific descriptions of the unsettling contents, designed to instill fear and unease. He projected screenshots of the insidious online messages sent directly to Emma, messages filled with manipulative undertones. And perhaps most damningly, he showed crystal clear security camera footage, timestamped and undeniable, depicting Jack himself, cloaked in shadow, lurking ominously near our home. A predatory specter. Each piece of evidence, cold and irrefutable, systematically built our case. Yet as I watched the judge, her expression remained utterly neutral. A perfectly composed mask that gave absolutely nothing away, leaving me to desperately search for any hint of her thoughts. Then arrived the emotionally charged testimony phase. My mother, in a performance that felt both genuine in its sorrow and deeply manipulative in its intent, took the stand first. She dabbed delicately at the corners of her eyes with a pristine tissue, her voice quivering as she launched into a tearful account of how I had allegedly torn our family apart with my obstinacy, unjustly preventing her from nurturing a loving relationship with Emma. She claimed, with a fragile sincerity, that she had only permitted Jack that solitary visit with Emma, not out of malice or conspiracy, but because she was a woman of profound faith, one who believed unequivocally in the power of forgiveness and the virtue of second chances. During cross-examination, Sib, ever the astute inquisitor, gently but firmly pressed her on the subject of the anonymous gifts those unsettling packages Emma had received. Initially, she denied any knowledge, her eyes wide with feigned surprise, but Sib was relentless. With a quiet flick of his wrist, he produced irrefutable phone records, laid out for all to see, clearly showing multiple calls between her personal number and Jack's, strategically placed immediately before the arrival of each mysterious package. The sudden, irrefutable contradiction visibly rattled her, her composure faltering, her carefully constructed facade beginning to crack. It was then, a subtle but significant shift, that the judge's left eyebrow arched ever so slightly, a fleeting but profound expression. It was the first, almost imperceptible crack in her seemingly impenetrable poker face, a flicker of something beyond mere neutrality. Jack took the stand next, radiating an aura of carefully cultivated sincerity. He presented himself as a genuinely reformed man, acknowledging his past mistakes of vague, generalized reference to his youthful indiscretions, but swiftly pivoting to paint a picture of a life utterly dedicated to redemption and responsibility. He spoke with a practiced cadence about his other children, his seemingly stable marriage, and his commendable volunteer work within the community, all designed to showcase his purported transformation into an exemplary father and upstanding citizen. His core assertion was deceptively simple. He claimed he merely wished to acknowledge Emma's existence and ensure she was thriving and well cared for. A facade of paternal concern that felt utterly chilling. When Sib began to grill him about his persistent appearances at Emma's school events, those unsettling, uninvited presences, Jack had a smooth, rehearsed answer for every single query. He was just passing by, he asserted, or he had legitimate business in the area, a convenient excuse for every encounter. He coolly pointed out that he had never approached Emma directly, implying that without direct contact, there was no actual harm, no infraction. His unnervingly calm, almost detached demeanor throughout this line of questioning, his eyes betraying no emotion, sent a visceral shudder of revulsion crawling across my skin. It was the absolute composure of a predator. Then, the proceedings took a sudden, wholly unexpected turn. The judge, her gaze sweeping across the courtroom, called for a brief recess, her voice cutting through the tension. When we reconvened, an electric silence filled the room as she delivered an announcement that instantly brought my world to a screeching halt. Emma, our precious daughter, had requested to speak with her privately in chambers. My heart, quite literally, ceased in my chest. We had consciously shielded Emma from the uglier realities of this legal battle, meticulously omitting the possibility of her direct involvement. She was blissfully unaware of the full, insidious extent of what was truly transpiring, and the thought of her facing the judge, vulnerable and unprepared, was agonizing. The subsequent wait for her return felt excruciating, each tick of the clock amplifying the unbearable suspense. Those 20 minutes stretched into an eternity, an endless, suffocating expanse of time where every breath was a silent prayer. When the judge finally returned, her entrance was met with bated breath. Her expression, previously an unreadable mask of neutrality, had undergone a subtle but profound transformation. There was a new gravitas in her eyes, a definite resolve etched into her features. She called the court back to order, her voice ringing with authority, and the words that followed were a symphony of sudden, overwhelming relief. She announced, with unwavering conviction, that based on Emma's brave, private testimony, a detail that underscored the immense courage of our daughter and the compelling evidence meticulously presented by Seb, she was not only denying Jack's petition outright, but was also issuing a permanent restraining order against him. A tidal wave of profound, intoxicating relief washed over me, a physical sensation that left me breathless and weak-kneed, as if a crushing weight had been instantaneously lifted from my chest. My vision blurred slightly with inch tears, but through the haze, I saw Jack's face contort, twisting into a dark, menacing mask of fury and resentment. His carefully constructed facade had crumbled, revealing the venomous anger beneath. As we made our way out of the courthouse, a collective exhale of tension filling the air, Jack deliberately brushed past me, his shoulder making sharp contact. He leaned in just enough for his voice, a low, guttural growl laden with chilling menace, to reach my ear. This isn't over, he hissed, his words a venomous promise of continued torment. Before I could even fully register the threat, my mother, her face still averted, hurried after him, a loyal shadow. In that stark moment, her swift departure, her unwavering allegiance to Jack even after the verdict, laid bare the ugly truth. Their insidious alliance, a partnership built on deceit and manipulation, was now fully, undeniably exposed for all to see. The immediate aftermath of the court ruling brought a period of deceptively fragile quiet. The tension that had permeated our home seemed to dissipate, replaced by a tentative sense of peace. Emma, sensing the shift, appeared noticeably lighter, a subtle return of her former spark, though we had consciously decided to shield her from the full, unsettling details of the court proceedings. She understood only that some people had been causing our family trouble, and that a kind judge had intervened to make them stop. We desperately attempted to re-establish a semblance of normal life, seeking solace in routine, yet beneath the surface of this newfound calm, a gnawing unease persisted within me. I simply couldn't shake the deeply unsettling premonition that something far more sinister was still brewing, a malevolent storm gathering on the horizon. My intuition, tragically, proved prescient. The incidents began subtly, seemingly innocuous at first, but escalating with chilling regularity. It started with a mechanical mishap. My husband's car, during a routine service, revealed mysteriously damaged brake lines, a sinister discovery made by our vigilant mechanic before any catastrophic failure could occur on the road, hinting at deliberate sabotage. Shortly after, a wave of humiliation swept through Emma's school when an anonymous, malicious tip falsely alleged the presence of illicit substances in her locker. This triggered a mortifying, public search that, predictably, yielded absolutely nothing, leaving Emma deeply confused and hurt. Our financial security was then systematically targeted. Our credit cards were repeatedly compromised, forcing us through the frustrating process of cancellation and reissuance. The insidious attacks escalated further when anonymous, false reports of child neglect were lodged with Child Protective Services, initiating intrusive and emotionally draining investigations that thankfully found no basis. Each individual incident, taken in isolation, could perhaps have been dismissed as an unfortunate coincidence, an explainable mishap. But when viewed collectively, a chillingly precise and undeniable pattern emerged. It became horrifyingly clear that Jack, a master of psychological warfare, was meticulously orchestrating these events, systematically attempting to destabilize every facet of our lives, our safety, our reputation, our finances, our peace of mind, all while carefully navigating the treacherous legal waters, ensuring he did not technically violate the strictures of the restraining order. His goal was not direct confrontation, but systematic erosion, a slow, agonizing dismantle of our existence. We diligently reported every single incident, from the brake lines to the false child services calls, to the police. However, their response, while sympathetic, was frustratingly limited. Without irrefutable, concrete proof directly linking Jack to these calculated acts of sabotage, a fingerprint, an undeniable confession, something tangible, their hands were legally tied. They acknowledged the disturbing pattern but were powerless to intervene beyond recording our reports. The true breaking point, the moment the fragile dam of our composure finally burst, arrived with a tearful phone call from Mrs. Jones, the mother of Emma's best friend. Her voice was raw with anguish, shaking as she recounted a nightmare scenario. Someone had maliciously sent a package containing deeply compromising photos directly to her husband's workplace. These weren't genuine images, but sickeningly convincing digital alterations designed to make her appear to be engaged in a series of highly inappropriate, scandalous situations. The accompanying anonymous message, dripping with venom, falsely accused her of engaging in multiple affairs with men in our very own neighborhood. Her marriage, once solid, was now reeling, plunged into an agonizing crisis of trust and suspicion. This wasn't an isolated attack. With a chilling precision, other families who had bravely stood by us, offering unwavering support during the court battle, began to experience their own terrifying versions of harassment. Mysterious, damaging calls were placed to their employers, filled with baseless accusations designed to jeopardize their livelihoods. False reports were filed with various obscure agencies, triggering disruptive investigations, and, just like Mrs. Jones, many found themselves battling the insidious spread of digitally manipulated images, fabricated to smear their reputations and sow discord in their personal lives. It became frighteningly apparent that Jack had pivoted his strategy. He was now systematically targeting our allies, meticulously dismantling our support system, brick by brick. His goal was to isolate us completely, to leave us utterly exposed and vulnerable. Some families, understandably fearing for their own security and reputation, regretfully distanced themselves, not wanting to be caught in Jack's malicious crossfire. Yet others, with commendable courage, stood firm, but I could see the immense strain, the sleepless nights, and the quiet anxieties etched onto their faces. The overwhelming guilt became a constant, suffocating weight in my stomach. These innocent people, our loyal friends, were suffering, their lives upended, simply because they had dared to extend a hand of compassion and tried to help us. Then, one ordinary afternoon, Emma came home from school, utterly oblivious to the profound impact her seemingly innocuous words would have, delivering news that utterly shattered our carefully maintained, fragile calm. "Mom," she announced, her voice bright with childish observation, "we have a new counselor at school now. His name is Mr. McCathan, and he seems really interested in our family. He keeps asking me how things are going at home, about everything. The casual innocence of her statement was a cruel counterpoint to the immediate, visceral terror that seized me. My blood quite literally ran cold, a glacial chill spreading through my veins as a horrifying realization dawned. The timing, the focus, the subtle inquiries, it was all too precise, too deliberate. I immediately snatched up the phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed the school. The secretary, cheerful and oblivious, confirmed their recent hiring of a new counselor. She assured me his credentials had been meticulously checked, his references were impeccable, and there was, on paper, absolutely no objective reason to suspect him of anything remotely inappropriate. Yet the sheer, audacious convenience of his arrival, coupled with his specific line of questioning, screamed of Jack's insidious orchestration. It felt like the final, chilling piece of a malevolent puzzle falling into place. A primal resolve, a fierce maternal instinct, surged through me, overriding all fear. The next morning, fueled by a mixture of dread and unyielding determination, I drove to the school, my jaw set, my hands gripping the steering wheel. I was absolutely resolute. I would meet this new counselor, this Mr. McCathan. I would look him in the eye, I would probe beneath the surface of his professional facade, and I would uncover the truth, whatever it might be. The man who greeted me in the counseling office itself felt unsettlingly sterile, its stark, modern professionalism radiating an impersonal chill, while the counselor, Mr. McCatherine, presented a facade of competence and seemingly genuine warmth, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in his eyes when he looked at me ignited every primal alarm bell in my system, a visceral, instinctual warning that screamed danger. How could a professional presence feel so deeply wrong? Over the ensuing days, Emma began to recount more and more frequent conversations with Mr. McCatherine, a creeping invasiveness I couldn't ignore. He subtly probed her feelings about her family dynamics, asking whether she ever felt a lingering sense of incompleteness, as if something crucial were missing from her life. Did she ever find herself wondering about unknown extended family members, yearning for connections she didn't even realize she lacked? His questions, artfully framed and carefully weighted, were crafted to appear deeply therapeutic, yet I, with a mother's fierce instinct, immediately recognized the insidious undercurrent of manipulation. He wasn't seeking healing. He was meticulously planting seeds of doubt and discontent. Our immediate attempts to have Emma reassigned to a different counselor were met with a frustrating bureaucratic stonewall from the school administration. They were dismissive, citing Mr. McCatherine's stellar qualifications, advanced degrees, glowing recommendations, and a charismatic demeanor that clearly charmed the faculty. Emma seems to respond remarkably well to him, they insisted, their words a superficial judgment against my deeply felt maternal concerns. Without what they termed concrete evidence of wrongdoing, a frustratingly elusive standard for psychological manipulation, they flatly refused to make any change, leaving us in a perilous limbo. Meanwhile, the relentless harassment campaign against our family intensified, a cruel counterpoint to the school's inaction. My husband's employer began receiving a barrage of anonymous complaints, vague yet damaging accusations targeting his work performance and professionalism, designed to subtly undermine his career and sow suspicion. Simultaneously, Tyler's daycare was repeatedly besieged with calls from unknown numbers, relaying utterly false and malicious concerns about fabricated bruises or exaggerated behavioral issues. Each call an exhausting and infuriating ordeal to debunk, directly attacking our fitness as parents. It felt as though every single aspect of our once stable lives was under a coordinated, malevolent siege, leaving us emotionally drained and constantly on edge. Then, a telephone call arrived that shattered our suffocating reality, transforming everything. The voice on the other end belonged to a woman named Sarah, her tone urgent, almost breathless, as she insisted she needed to speak with me immediately about Jack. We arranged a discreet meeting at a bustling coffee shop downtown, its ambient noise a thin shield for the clandestine, life-altering revelations that were about to unfold. There, amidst the clatter of cups and hushed conversations, Sarah, her eyes haunted but resolute, revealed the chilling truth. She was Jack's ex-wife, the mother of his other, forgotten children. Sarah's story, delivered in a low, trembling voice, was nothing short of chilling, sending a cold dread through me. Years prior, she had endured a similar nightmare, leaving Jack after the horrifying discovery that he had been systematically grooming their teenage babysitter. She had fought tooth and nail for full custody of her children, ultimately winning. But Jack, a man incapable of accepting defeat, had systematically and mercilessly retaliated. His revenge was a calculated campaign of destruction, lost jobs engineered through anonymous sabotage, ruined relationships tainted by his insidious lies, and a relentless onslaught of frivolous legal battles that financially and emotionally crippled her. The torment had been so profound and unending that she had finally been forced to uproot her entire life, moving across the country to escape his inescapable reach. A testament to his unrelenting cruelty. When I heard he was doing this to another family, when I saw the familiar, horrifying patterns repeating themselves, I knew, despite my own trauma, I had to warn you, she declared, her voice heavy with a grim resolve, as she slid a thick, worn folder across the table towards me. The folder was heavy, bulging with years of meticulously documented suffering, a tangible manifestation of her ordeal. This is everything I've documented, she continued, every incident, every pattern of his manipulation and abuse. He won't Stop. You must understand. Until he gets exactly what he wants, or until he utterly destroys you trying, her words, a dire prophecy, hung heavy in the air, underscoring the relentless nature of the monster we were facing. The contents of that folder were a grim roadmap, a terrifying instructional manual detailing Jack's insidious tactics. Sarah had painstakingly chronicled how he skillfully recruited others, often unwitting pawns, to assist in his campaigns, and how he masterfully orchestrated chaos and psychological torment while always managing to stay just within the convoluted boundaries of the law, leveraging plausible deniability. Most crucially, within those pages were names, dates, and meticulously detailed incidents that correlated with horrifying precision to similar events that had plagued our own lives. The pieces of the terrifying puzzle clicked into place, revealing a pattern of malevolence that was both sickening and undeniable. Armed with this undeniable trove of new information, a shield of truth and a weapon of evidence, we returned to the police. This time, their demeanor was markedly different. They finally took notice, their previous skepticism replaced by a stark gravity. The sheer scale of Jack's depravity, a consistent pattern of behavior across multiple victims spanning different states, suggested something far more serious, something truly criminal. Transcending mere harassment, they opened a formal investigation, but Jack, like a cornered animal, must have sensed the tightening walls, the impending doom. In response, his attacks intensified with a desperate, furious vengeance. One night, our home security system, a crucial safeguard, mysteriously went offline, disabled remotely, leaving us exposed, though nothing was physically taken. It was a chilling message of his pervasive reach. Emma then received a birthday card at school with no signature. Only a deeply unsettling photo of a family reunion she had never attended, a cruel psychological ploy featuring his side of the family, implying a connection she was supposedly missing. Then Tyler's daycare reported a man matching Jack's description, brazenly asking probing questions about pickup procedures, a direct, audacious threat to our youngest child. Then came the night that very nearly shattered us completely. I awoke in a cold sweat at precisely 3 a.m., a profound sense of dread pulling me from sleep. In Emma's room, her window stood inexplicably open, the curtains billowing gently in the pre-dawn breeze. My heart hammered against my ribs. She was still asleep in her bed, thankfully unharmed, but the undeniable, horrifying certainty settled upon me. Someone had been in our home. On her desk, a single photograph lay, an old, faded image of Jack holding a baby and scrawled on the back, in an unmistakable hand, were the chilling words, "She looks just like you did." The implicit threat, equating Emma to a past target, was clear and terrifying. The police, called in a frenzy, found no fingerprints, no DNA, no physical evidence whatsoever, except for that single, damning photograph. Our security cameras, they confirmed, had been remotely disabled. Jack hadn't wanted to take Emma. He had wanted us to know, with terrifying certainty, that he could reach her whenever he desired. The message was unequivocally clear. The restraining order, a mere piece of paper, meant absolutely nothing to him. That night, we moved Emma into our bedroom, a desperate attempt to cocoon her, but the sense of violation lingered like a poisonous gas. I didn't sleep for days, every creak and whisper of the house sending me into a jolt of terror. My husband, his face etched with exhaustion, took precious time off work to help fortify our home, becoming a silent sentinel. We were prisoners in our own sanctuary, afraid to let our children out of our sight. Our once safe haven transformed into a gilded cage. The school situation, rather than improving, escalated further when Mr. McCatherine, with an almost theatrical display of concern, suggested Emma join a special family dynamics group therapy session, when I instinctively refused. He artfully twisted my parental protectiveness, expressing profound concern about my resistance to Emma's emotional development. Suddenly, I was not the vigilant mother, but rather painted as the problematic parent, an obstacle actively preventing my child from receiving essential psychological help. His insidious campaign quickly extended beyond us. Other parents in the tight-knit school community began receiving concerned calls from Mr. McCatherine, his faint empathy a venomous cloak. He subtly suggested Emma was exhibiting signs of emotional neglect and seemed isolated from extended family, a direct and damaging fabrication that echoed the very seeds of doubt he had been planting with Emma herself. These carefully worded accusations, dropped into the fertile ground of the school community's gossip mill, quickly took root and flourished, fostering suspicion and isolation around us. The devastating impact soon became apparent. Emma started coming home upset, recounting how other kids, influenced by the rumors, were asking her painful questions. Why doesn't your mom want you to be happy? And why aren't you allowed to know your real family? The psychological warfare was relentless, taking an immense toll on all of us, but its cruelest burden fell squarely on her innocent shoulders. Then, Sarah called again, her voice imbued with a renewed urgency, her news a chilling confirmation of our worst fears. She had, over the years, cultivated a network of Jack's other victims, meticulously tracking his movements and activities. Through this dark network, she discovered a crucial, terrifying detail. He had recently engaged with a lawyer infamous for taking on parental alienation cases, a specialist known for overturning restraining orders and cunningly securing custody for reformed parents. The horrifying realization hit us with the force of a physical blow. This entire, protracted ordeal hadn't merely been an act of revenge. It was all part of a larger, meticulously orchestrated plan. Every anonymous complaint, every fabricated accusation, every unsettling incident was designed to systematically dismantle my credibility, to portray me as unstable, paranoid, and ultimately unfit. Every single one of my protective, desperate reactions was being diligently documented and twisted, carefully cataloged to support a future predatory custody case. Faced with this terrifying strategy, I made the agonizing decision to pull Emma out of school for the remainder of the year, citing urgent safety concerns. The school, oblivious to the true nature of our plight, threatened truancy charges, adding yet another layer of stress. However, our lawyer, understanding the gravity of the situation, firmly advised that it was a far better choice than leaving her exposed to Mr. McCatherine's insidious influence, which was clearly acting as Jack's agent. The isolation that followed was crushing. Emma desperately missed her friends, her normal routine, her once familiar life. She'd begin asking poignant, heartbreaking questions that we, in our desperate attempts to shield her, couldn't fully answer without inflicting further trauma. How indeed do you explain to a child that the biological father she has never known is a manipulative, dangerous predator? How do you even begin to convey that her own grandmother, Jack's mother, had inexplicably chosen him over her own daughter, over Emma's safety and well-being? Our marriage, once an unshakable fortress, visibly strained under the relentless pressure. My husband, bless his unwavering loyalty, remained steadfastly supportive, yet I could see the profound exhaustion etched deep in his eyes, the heavy weight of an unforeseen battle. He had signed up, with open arms, to be Emma's loving father, but certainly not for this interminable, psychologically brutal warfare. Late-night arguments became more frequent, hushed but heated debates over increasingly desperate options. Should we sell our home, sever all ties, and simply move? Should we change our names, vanish into anonymity? How far, we wondered in despair, would we have to run to truly escape Jack's terrifying reach? Yet, the very idea of running felt like surrendering, like letting him win, and there was no guarantee, no comforting assurance that he wouldn't relentlessly hunt us down again. Then, a lifeline, the private investigator we had quietly hired, a beacon of hope in our darkest hour, uncovered something absolutely crucial, a definitive breakthrough. Mr. McCatherine, the seemingly professional counselor, wasn't who he claimed to be. His impressive credentials were, in fact, meticulously forged, his glowing references entirely fake. He was actually Jack's cousin, a sinister figure who had, disturbingly, aided him in the methodical stalking of previous victims, became the crucial thread that unraveled everything. This chilling discovery wasn't just a piece of evidence. It was the seismic shock that shattered the entire case wide open, illuminating the dark corners of a meticulously planned campaign of terror. The school, once a bastion of safety, was utterly mortified, consumed by a palpable shame at their catastrophic failure to properly vet the fake counselor. Their professional negligence, now exposed, led to frantic damage control and a deep institutional introspection. Meanwhile, the police, armed with this newfound, concrete evidence, finally understood the full, disturbing scope of an elaborate, deeply entrenched conspiracy. How many layers of deceit had they overlooked? Warrants, now imbued with a furious urgency, were swiftly issued for both Jack and the duplicitous counselor. Yet, with a frustratingly familiar cunning, they vanished into thin air before the authorities could even close in. Jack's house, a place that once held secrets, now stood eerily empty. Every surface meticulously cleaned, every personal trace painstakingly removed as if scrubbed from existence. Mr. McCatherine, the supposed empathetic ear, never again returned to the school, a ghostly absence confirming his deception. My mother's phone, once a lifeline, simply went dead, disconnected with a stark, unsettling finality. They hadn't merely run, they'd expertly gone underground, dissolving into the shadows like phantoms, suggesting a level of organization and preparation that sent shivers down my spine. The psychological toll of the not knowing, the agonizing void of uncertainty, was almost more insufferable, more corrosive, than the actual acts of harassment we had endured. Every seemingly innocuous stranger on the street became a potential watcher, their casual glance a suspected surveillance. Every unexpected noise, a creaking floorboard, a distant siren, the rustle of leaves made my heart hammer a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a cold sweat breaking out on my skin. Our lives devolved into a constant, exhausting state of hypervigilance, a cage of fear from which there seemed no escape. We were always on high alert, our senses frayed, our spirits perpetually on edge. 2 weeks into their unsettling disappearance, a thick, anonymous envelope landed in our mailbox, devoid of any return address. My hands trembled as I tore it open, dread coiling in my stomach. Inside, a single sheet of stark white paper bore only a time, a date, and a location. A tranquil park where Emma, years ago, had spent countless carefree afternoons on the swings and slides. At the very bottom, scrawled in Jack's unmistakable, chilling handwriting, was the ultimatum: come alone if you want this to end. Was this a twisted gesture of nostalgia? Or merely a calculated move to maximize my discomfort, to twist the knife of memory? A visceral knowing flooded me. It was a trap, cunningly set. Every fiber of my being screamed not to go, to flee, to protect myself. Yet I was so utterly, profoundly tortured of running, of the constant, weary burden of looking over my shoulder, of the soul-crushing agony of watching my family suffer. Trapped in this unending nightmare, a fierce, desperate resolve began to take root. Perhaps, I thought, it was time to confront this evil head-on, to face the monster in the daylight. I showed the letter to my husband and Sarah, their faces immediately edged with alarm. Both pleaded, their voices thick with fear, begging me not to go. But my mind was already irrevocably made up. This torturous saga, this relentless cat-and-mouse game, had to conclude, one way or another, regardless of the risks. We reached a tense, reluctant compromise. I would go, yes, but they wouldn't be far, positioned nearby, ready to dial the police at a moment's notice should anything go awry. The night before the fateful meeting, I sat by Emma's bedside, her small, peaceful face illuminated by the soft glow of her nightlight. I watched the gentle rise and fall of her chest, her soft, innocent breathing. She deserved so much more than this shadow-laden life of fear and unspoken secrets. Tyler, my brave little boy, deserved to grow up unburdened by the oppressive shadow of Jack's malevolent threat. My husband, my unwavering rock, deserved a wife whose spirit wasn't constantly fractured by anxiety, a woman not perpetually scanning the periphery for danger. My thoughts then drifted to my mother, a complex tapestry of lingering hurt and desperate questions. Was she truly with Jack? Was she, incomprehensibly, an active participant in this final, cruel play? The very woman who, by every societal and maternal expectation, should have protected me, had instead, through her complicity, become my enemy's most formidable ally. The sting of that profound betrayal still burned fresh, a raw wound festering even after all these years. As the first faint streaks of dawn began to paint the sky on the day of the meeting, I prepared myself, not just physically, but mentally, for whatever horrors might await me. The meticulous evidence we had painstakingly gathered was safely secured with our lawyer, a strategic safeguard. Emma and Tyler, my precious children, were with trusted friends ensconced in a carefully chosen location that Jack, in his twisted omniscience, could never possibly know about. If something truly terrible happened to me, if I didn't return, they would, at the very least, be protected, shielded from further harm. I drove towards the park, the morning mist clinging to the nascent light, wrapping the world in a hazy, ethereal shroud. My hands, surprisingly, felt steady on the wheel, my mind remarkably clear, free from the paralyzing grip of fear. This relentless cat-and-mouse game, this psychological torment, had stretched on for far too long. Today, I vowed, one way or another, it would finally, definitively end. The park, usually bustling with early morning joggers and dog walkers, was eerily empty, save for a lone, desolate figure perched on a bench near the silent playground swings. As I approached, my heart racing for the expected confrontation, a jarring jolt of surprise shot through me. It wasn't Jack, it was my mother. She looked impossibly older, her frame more frail, more stooped than when I'd last seen her across a cold courtroom. Her hands, gnarled and trembling noticeably, clutched her worn purse as if it were a fragile anchor. "He's not coming," she rasped, her voice thin and reedy, as I drew nearer. He sent me to deliver a message. I stopped several feet away, maintaining a wary distance, every muscle tensed, ready to bolt if necessary. "What message?" I demanded, my voice deliberately flat, devoid of emotion. With a hesitant, trembling hand, she pulled out an envelope, extending it towards me. "He's leaving the country," she whispered, her gaze skirting mine. "He wanted you to know he's done fighting." But he had conditions. I didn't take the envelope, my eyes fixed on hers. "What conditions?" I pressed, my patience wearing thin. "He wants a photo of Emma every year on her birthday." Her voice cracked, laden with an unsettling mixture of fear and reluctant compliance. "Sent to a P.O. box. No return address needed, just so he knows she's okay." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "He says if you agree to this," she continued, her voice barely audible, "he'll disappear forever." I stared at her, an icy fury seething beneath my calm exterior. If not what?" I demanded, the unspoken threat hanging heavy in the air. Finally, her eyes, filled with a raw, undeniable fear, met mine. "He says he'll dedicate his life to making yours miserable. That what you've experienced so far is nothing compared to what he's capable of." It was a venomous promise, designed to chill me to the bone. I stared at her, this woman who had given birth to me, who, above all others, should have been my fierce protector, who had, inexplicably, chosen my tormentor over her own daughter. "And you're helping him," the accusation hung heavy in the misty air. Her reply was a faint, almost imperceptible whisper. "I don't have a choice. He knows things about me, things that would utterly destroy what little life I have left." My jaw tightened. "You always had a choice," I retorted, each word a cold, sharp shard of glass. "You just never chose me." I turned abruptly, my decision made, and walked away, leaving her slumped on the bench, her quiet sobs fading into the morning stillness. I didn't take the envelope. I would not, under any circumstances, negotiate with Jack. I would not give him even a single photo of Emma, a twisted token of his continued, perverse ownership. He had already taken more than enough from us, stolen enough of our peace and innocence. As I drove home, a grim resolve cementing in my heart, I immediately called the police to report the meeting. They found my mother still in the park, a pathetic figure, but she steadfastly claimed complete ignorance regarding Jack's whereabouts. The envelope, when finally opened by the authorities, contained only the P.O. box information and, in a final, agonizingly twisted psychological jab, a photo of Jack's other children, a stark, silent reminder of the normal and troubled family life Emma was being robbed of. That was 3 months ago. Jack, despite a relentless, nationwide search, has yet to be found, a ghost in the system, perpetually lurking. The fake counselor, however, was apprehended attempting a desperate border crossing into Canada and is currently awaiting trial, his elaborate deception finally unmasked. My mother was charged with aiding and abetting, but received probation, a lenient sentence attributed to her age and, disturbingly, her claims of coercion, though the veracity of those claims remains a lingering question mark in my mind. We've slowly, painstakingly, begun the arduous process of rebuilding our lives. Emma is now in therapy with a real counselor, a kind and understanding woman, carefully working through the trauma of the past year without, thankfully, fully comprehending its horrifying scope. She's back in school, protected by new, stringent security measures. Tyler, in his innocent oblivion, remains blissfully unaware of the profound danger that once surrounded us, a fragile shield against the world's harsh realities. The community that, in our darkest hour, stood by us with unwavering solidarity, has emerged from the ordeal stronger, more bonded, Mrs. Jones's marriage, once under relentless attack, survived the assault on her reputation, a testament to resilience. Parents, once complacent, are now fiercely vigilant about school security, their collective awareness a powerful bulwark against future threats. What Jack so cruelly meant to destroy has, ironically, only forged us closer together, a testament to the indomitable human spirit. Yet, despite the progress, the scars remain. I still meticulously double-check the locks twice each night, a ritualistic act of defiance against the lingering threat. I still involuntarily scan crowds for his face, a phantom menace perpetually present in my peripheral vision. I still jump, my heart leaping into my throat, whenever an unexpected package arrives at the door. Sarah, my steadfast friend, tells me this hypervigilance, this constant state of heightened alert, may never fully fade. It is, she explains, the inevitable price of surviving someone as profoundly malevolent as Jack. My husband and I are also in counseling, diligently working through the immense strain this ordeal placed on our marriage, a fragile vase shattered and slowly being pieced back together. He has never once wavered in his unwavering commitment to Emma, to our family, a beacon of strength in the darkness. But we both carry invisible scars from this protracted battle, wounds that may never completely heal. Trust, once so irrevocably broken by those who should have protected you, is not easily rebuilt. It's a delicate, arduous construction. Emma, in her innocent questioning, asked me recently why she doesn't have grandparents like her friends, a poignant reminder of the fractured legacy Jack left behind, and the painful truth that some parts of our past are simply too broken to mend. Her friends do. I carefully crafted a softened version of the truth for her, explaining that sometimes, like fragile glass, families shatter when individuals make profoundly painful choices that wound others deeply. A quiet understanding flickered in her eyes, a fleeting nod of acceptance, but a cold certainty settled in my stomach. This fragile peace was temporary. How could I prepare for the intricate, piercing questions that would undoubtedly surface as she navigated the labyrinth of adolescence and beyond? The relentless investigation peeled back layers of deceit, revealing a chilling truth. Jack's cruelty wasn't an isolated incident. Sarah, our brave Sarah, was merely one star in a dark constellation of his victims. A haunting trail of women, like breadcrumbs leading through a nightmare, stretched across multiple states, each bearing the invisible scars of identical battles against his predatory nature. They had endured the same insidious tactics, lived under the suffocating shadow of his promised retaliation, their lives dictated by a pervasive, gut-wrenching fear. Some, exhausted and broken, had capitulated to his sinister demands, their spirits crushed. Others, driven by a desperate instinct for survival, had vanished, seeking anonymity and peace elsewhere. But a defiant few, like us, had chosen a different path, gathering our shattered resolve to fight back against the darkness. From the ashes of our shared torment, we forged an unbreakable support network, a clandestine sisterhood born not of choice, but of dire necessity. We are the survivors, united by the insidious tendrils of Jack's relentless obsession, his malevolent shadow still looming. Within this sacred circle, we meticulously share every scrap of information, each whisper of a potential sighting. Our collective eyes peeled for the slightest tremor that might signal his dreaded reappearance. We offer each other a profound, unspoken understanding, a solace that only blossoms from the scorched earth of shared trauma, a bond forged in fire, strong as steel. Yet none of us, not one, ever wished to join its ranks. Law enforcement authorities, with a practiced air of cautious optimism, surmised that Jack had indeed slipped across borders, likely seeking refuge in some obscure corner of the world devoid of extradition treaties, a sanctuary for those who flee justice. Yet, despite their professional assurances, a visceral knot of unease tightened in my gut. I didn't feel safe. Predatorous individuals like Jack, driven by a perverse sense of entitlement and control, don't simply vanish or relinquish their prey. Just then, the morning quiet was shattered as Emma burst into the kitchen, a whirlwind of youthful energy. Her backpack, a riot of colorful patches, was carelessly slung over one shoulder as she snatched a crisp apple from the counter with practiced ease, planting a swift, sweet kiss on my cheek before she whisked past. My husband trailed behind her, meticulously adjusting the knot of his tie, a picture of calm preparedness, while our youngest, Tyler, a tiny limpet still encased in his favorite dinosaur pajamas, clung tenaciously to his leg. Ready for school? I inquired, consciously infusing my voice with a bright, entirely fabricated normalcy, pushing down the tremor of anxiety that perpetually resided beneath the surface. She nodded, her expression momentarily clouding as she hesitated at the doorway. Mom, Lily's having a sleepover this weekend. Can I go? Lily, a sweet, bright girl, was Mrs. Jones's daughter. In any other life, this would have been a quintessential, straightforward childhood request, a simple yes or no, but simple was a word that had been brutally excised from our vocabulary. Nothing, absolutely nothing, felt simple anymore. My eyes instinctively sought my husband's, and he met my gaze with a reassuring, yet subtly knowing nod, a silent acknowledgement of the tightrope we now walked. Let me just have a quick chat with Lily's mom first, darling, I replied, my tone deliberately calm. A soft deflection. A shadow of disappointment flickered across Emma's animated face. Her youthful exuberance momentarily dimmed, but she didn't protest. A quiet understanding, a maturity far beyond her years, had settled upon her. She knew, without needing explicit words, that our new normal was an intricate tapestry woven with threads of heightened vigilance and unyielding extra precautions. A constant shield against unseen dangers. As soon as the door clicked shut behind them, sealing away the fleeting illusion of a carefree morning, I reached for the phone and dialed Mrs. Jones. Her voice, calm and compassionate, flowed through the receiver, offering immediate reassurance. She detailed the formidable fortifications they had implemented. State-of-the-art security cameras now surveyed every inch of their property, silently watchful, and her husband, a man of quiet strength, would be a constant, protective presence throughout the entire weekend. Together, we meticulously crafted a fail-safe system, a delicate thread of communication designed to soothe my anxious heart. Emma would send a concise text message every 2 hours, a digital heartbeat affirming her safety, and I, without hesitation, would be there in an instant, ready to whisk her away should the faintest tremor of unease, the slightest whisper of wrongness, prickle my intuition. Later that same afternoon, I found myself in the sterile, yet surprisingly cluttered, office of the prosecutor overseeing the case against the fraudulent counselor, the venal conduit who had facilitated Jack's sinister schemes. With a methodical precision that belied the horror of the subject matter, she fanned out a grim mosaic of evidence across her polished desk, stark photographs, grainy surveillance footage meticulously compiled from disparate locations, all depicting Jack's cousin, a chillingly familiar face, systematically stalking other unsuspecting families years prior. The malevolent pattern, a signature of psychological warfare, was absolutely undeniable, a chilling testament to their premeditated malice. We'd definitively linked him to no fewer than 7 other chilling cases, she stated, her voice taut with grim satisfaction. And your meticulously detailed documentation, every single date and observation, was instrumental in helping us connect these disparate, dark dots. He, the cousin, was certainly facing a substantial, well-deserved prison sentence. A small measure of justice. Yet the architect of our torment, Jack himself, remained frustratingly out of reach, an untouchable phantom concealed in the impenetrable shadows somewhere beyond the grasp of the law, a constant, gnawing threat. Collecting Emma from school that afternoon became an exercise in heightened paranoia. My gaze was far more frequently drawn to the vigilant dance of my rearview and side mirrors than to the road stretching out ahead, every glint of chrome a potential threat. As we paused at a red light, a cold tremor snaked down my spine. 3 cars back, a dark sedan loitered. Precisely the same vehicle that had been clinging to our tail ever since we pulled away from the school's curb. My pulse, an anxious drum, instantly quickened its frantic beat. Acting on pure instinct, I executed an abrupt, unexpected turn down a residential street, then immediately another, weaving through familiar neighborhoods in an attempt to lose any potential shadow. The car, however, continued straight, oblivious to my desperate maneuvers. Just paranoia, I chastised myself, exhaling a shaky breath, yet a persistent, icy tendril of unease coiled in my stomach. The feeling, a premonition perhaps, was impossible to shake. Back at the deceptive sanctuary of our home, I discovered my husband, his brow furrowed with concern, engrossed in a tense phone conversation with our bank. The news, when he finally explained, was a chilling confirmation of my deepest fears. A brazen attempt had been made to infiltrate our meticulously secured accounts, originating from an IP address traced ominously to Mexico. While our recently reinforced security protocols had, thankfully, thwarted the digital invasion, the sheer geographic proximity Mexico sent an Arctic wave washing over my entire body, making my blood run cold. A stark truth flashed through my mind. Mexico, notoriously, holds no extradition treaty for harassment charges, offering a potentially impregnable haven for someone like Jack. Despite the encroaching darkness, we clung fiercely to the fragments of our routine. Emma, with a quiet focus, worked diligently on her homework at the expansive kitchen table, her young mind engaged in the everyday complexities of algebra or history. I, meanwhile, moved through the familiar motions of preparing dinner, each chop of a vegetable, each stir of a pot, a deliberate act of normalcy. At her feet, our youngest, Tyler, absorbed in his own miniature universe, tinkered with an assortment of colorful toy locks, occasionally interrupting her concentration with an enthusiastic presentation of his latest creations. These unassuming, quiet moments, suspended in time, felt exquisitely precious, yet agonizingly fragile, like iridescent soap bubbles shimmering in the air, poised to burst and vanish at the slightest unexpected touch. My phone, a sudden jolt, vibrated insistently in my hand. It was a message from Sarah, an urgent ping to our tightly knit support group. The words on the screen, though concise, painted a familiar, horrifying picture. New victim in Arizona. Same pattern, gifts, online contact, escalation. She needs our help. A fresh casualty in Jack's insidious campaign. Another life entangled in the same web of manipulation, the unsolicited, seemingly innocent gifts, the calculated online overtures, the inexorable, terrifying escalation that always followed. Our network, a lifeline for those ensnared, was needed again. That night, long after the gentle rhythms of our children's breathing filled the quiet house, I made the call. The woman's voice, thin and ready with barely contained terror, trembled palpably as she recounted her nightmare. The unnerving sight of Jack, a stark, unwelcome figure, brazenly appearing at her daughter's innocent dance recital. The chilling arrival of anonymous, subtly threatening packages. The insidious proliferation of fake social media accounts, meticulously crafted to undermine and torment. With a practice calm I barely felt, I guided her, step by painful step, through the critical process of meticulously documenting every single detail, every fleeting encounter, every unsettling occurrence. I provided her with our lawyer's direct contact, a beacon of legal fortitude, and patiently shared the hard-won strategies that had, to some degree, shielded us. Will this torment ever truly end? She whispered, her voice a fragile plea. The question hung heavy in the air, a desolate echo of my own unspoken fears, and I, despite all our battles, had no answer to offer, only a weary silence. The following morning, as if the universe conspired to pile further burdens upon us, brought a thick, official registered letter. Its stark formality a jarring contrast to the warmth of the rising sun. It was from my mother's lawyer, and its contents sent a fresh wave of nausea washing over me. She was formally suing for grandparent visitation rights. My hands, despite my efforts to steady them, trembled visibly as I unfolded the crisp legal filing, each word a venomous sting. She vehemently claimed I was deliberately alienating her grandchildren, systematically denying them their rightful heritage, phrases that struck with a chilling familiarity. The manipulative, accusatory language, the insidious undertone. It was an unsettling, almost perfect echo of Jack's past threats, a sinister symphony played by a different hand. Sub, our ever-reliable legal shield, received the documents that very afternoon, his expression grim but resolute. She has absolutely no case, not a leg to stand on, he assured me, his voice firm. The court already ruled definitively on this matter. But he added with a sigh, we still need to formally respond, more legal fees, another relentless drain on our finances. More precious hours devoured by the sterile, adversarial atmosphere of courtrooms. More invaluable energy already so depleted, mercilessly siphoned away, not for living, not for healing, but for perpetually fighting, a never-ending battle against ghosts and shadows. As Emma's eagerly anticipated sleepover finally approached, a bittersweet mix of excitement and apprehension swirled within me. I meticulously helped her pack, ensuring every detail was accounted for, including the small, discreet emergency phone I had purchased for her, a silent guardian against unforeseen dangers. She rolled her eyes with a perfectly theatrical teenage sigh, a clear protest against what she perceived as excessive parental caution, yet, without a single word of complaint. She dutifully tucked the device deep inside her sleeping bag, a tacit acknowledgement of our unspoken anxieties. When I dropped her off at Lily's house, Mrs. Jones met me at the door, her face a mask of compassionate understanding. She enveloped my hand in a warm, reassuring squeeze. Don't you worry, she murmured quietly, her gaze firm and comforting. We've organized a rigorous parent patrol, 6 sets of watchful eyes on rotation throughout the night. She'd be safe, I promise you. That evening, a restless energy coursed through me, compelling me to pace the length and breadth of our house, a caged animal in its own home. My phone became an extension of my anxiety, clutched in my hand. Its screen checked every few minutes for a flicker of reassurance. Emma's texts, a steady, rhythmic pulse, arrived like clockwork. Making pizza, watching movies, Lily's dad is teaching us card tricks. With each short, innocent message, the tight, suffocating knot of dread that had cinched my chest began to loosen, just slightly, a fragile reprieve. My husband, ever attuned to my unspoken turmoil, gently drew me onto the couch, enveloping me in the comforting warmth of his arms. Tyler, exhausted from his day, had long since succumbed to sleep, his small head nestled against his father's chest, his thumb instinctively finding its way to his mouth. We sat in companionable silence, the profound, inescapable weight of our new, altered reality pressing down on us, a heavy, invisible blanket. Then, at precisely 10 p.m., a jarring, intrusive ring echoed through the quiet house, the doorbell. We both instantly froze, our bodies tensing, every muscle coiled. My husband, his movements slow and deliberate, carefully lowered Tyler's sleeping form onto the soft cushions of the couch. As he cautiously made his way towards the front door, I, with a surge of adrenaline, grabbed my phone, fingers poised over the keypad, utterly prepared to dial 911. Through the tiny, distorted lens of the peephole, he saw not a monster, but our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, a sweet, slightly bewildered figure, holding out a misdelivered package. A wave of relief quickly followed by a dark, ironic humor washed over us, and we managed a few shaky laughs afterwards. But the sound was hollow, utterly devoid of genuine mirth. This, we realized with a fresh pang of despair, was our life now. Every single unexpected sound, every sudden movement, every deviation from the carefully curated normalcy, was instantly reinterpreted, dissected, and analyzed as a potential imminent threat. A constant shadow lurking at the periphery of our peace. The following morning, when I arrived to collect Emma, she bounced out of Lily's house, a vision of youthful exuberance. Her eyes sparkling as she chattered animatedly about the sleepover's every delightful detail, the giggling, the late-night snacks, the whispered secrets. She seemed blissfully, completely unaware of the silence. Vigilant parent patrolled the rotating shifts of protective adults who had stood guard throughout the entire night. A human shield against the unseen. Her unwavering resilience, her effortless return to joy, was nothing short of astonishing, a breathtaking display of youthful spirit. Yet, as I watched her, a poignant question pierced my heart. What unseen, indelible scars, what quiet anxieties did she carry silently beneath that bright, cheerful facade, hidden from the world's discerning gaze? That week, the man masquerading as a compassionate counselor, a chameleon named Marcus, finally cracked under the pressure of his own impending doom. He struck a Faustian bargain with the prosecution, a tantalizing offer of a reduced sentence, a chance to reclaim some semblance of his future. In exchange for betraying the architect of his past crimes, he proved to be a veritable encyclopedia of information, meticulously detailing Jack's intricate network of accomplices, the precise mechanisms of his illicit operations, and the financial flows that fueled his depravity. The prosecutor, a woman with a steely gaze and an unwavering commitment to justice, called me with periodic updates, each one a bitter pill mixed with a drop of victory. They'd identified 3 more accomplices, she informed me, their names echoing the dark reach of Jack's influence, and all 3 were now behind bars. Yet, Marcus's confession had a critical omission. He claimed no knowledge of Jack's current whereabouts. He compartmentalized everything, she explained, her voice edged with frustration. Marcus, despite his intimate involvement, was merely a cog in a vast, clandestine machine, privy only to the isolated functions of his own part, utterly blind to the grand design, or the man orchestrating it all. I attended Marcus's sentencing, a grim ritual that felt more like an obligation than a choice. He avoided my eyes as the judge, a figure of stoic authority, methodically read the litany of charges, each word a hammer blow against the vestiges of his past life. 15 years, with the possibility of parole in 7. It was a sentence that felt both too long and not long enough. As they led him away, his hands shackled, a ghost of a man stripped of his deceitful facade, his gaze finally, fleetingly, met mine. His mouth moved, forming silent words I couldn't discern through the thick haze of my own contempt and exhaustion. Later, the bailiff, a kindly man who seemed to carry the weight of all the courtroom's sorrow, pulled me aside. He said he won't stop, he relayed, his voice low, a chilling echo that solidified the fear Marcus's unspoken words had planted. Spring, typically a season of renewal and hope, descended upon us with a brutal, almost mocking normalcy. The world outside our shattered bubble dared to thrive, blossoming in vibrant hues, while we remained trapped in the chilling aftermath, forever marked by the winter's darkness. It was a cruel irony, a silent testament to the world's indifference. Emma, with the irrepressible optimism of childhood, tried out for the school play and, to her delight, landed a small part, a tiny beacon of normalcy in our tumultuous lives. Tyler, ever curious and energetic, started preschool 3 mornings a week, his innocent world still largely untouched by the shadows lurking in ours. My husband, a rock of steadfast support, received a promotion at work, a testament to his resilience and unwavering commitment. Life, in its relentless march, moved forward even as we, with our hearts heavy with dread, constantly looked backward, scanning the horizon for the next threat. Then, like a venomous serpent slithering into our carefully constructed peace, the video arrived. It materialized in my inbox, an email from an anonymous and traceable address, a digital ghost with a sinister message. The subject line, dark and chilling, seared itself into my mind. She's beautiful. My breath caught, lodged somewhere between my throat and my pounding chest. Every fiber of my being screamed to delete it, to sever the connection to this digital abyss. Yet a macabre curiosity, a desperate need to understand the new depth of this torment, held my finger paralyzed above the delete button. I clicked. The video, grainy but unmistakably clear, showed Emma at her school play rehearsal, filmed from outside the auditorium windows. The angle, insidious in its implications, suggested someone positioned in the parking lot, armed with a high-powered telephoto lens, watching, waiting. A cold dread, a tangible fear, seized me. I drove to the school immediately, my hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, and thrust my phone into the principal's hands. They reviewed every inch of their security footage, but found nothing, not a single suspicious shadow or unfamiliar vehicle. Whoever filmed it, it became horrifyingly clear, knew the camera blind spots, the precise gaps in our defenses. We increased security again, installing more cameras, hiring additional guards, reinforcing every vulnerable point. But how many times, I wondered, could we build the walls higher before they crumbled under the relentless assault of his obsession? The police, their faces etched with a familiar blend of determination and frustration, eventually traced the insidious email to a grimy internet cafe nestled in the labyrinthine streets of Tijuana. Tijuana, a physical distance, yet psychologically, he was right next door. It wasn't just a location, it was a declaration. Jack, it seemed, was not merely hiding. He was performing, reveling in his ability to taunt us from beyond their jurisdiction, beyond the long arm of the law. He was showcasing his persistent, terrifying reach, demonstrating with chilling clarity that he could still watch, still violate the sanctity of our lives, our emotional boundaries. Whenever his twisted whim dictated, Emma, with the keen observation skills of a child, noticed the heightened security at school, the new faces, the stricter protocols, the subtle but palpable shift in atmosphere. Is it because of him, she asked one evening, her voice small, not needing to specify who. My meticulously constructed plan to shield her from the full horror of our reality, to wait until she was older, shattered in that moment. She deserves some truth, however painful. I explained that someone from our past, a very troubled person, was trying to bother our family, but I reassured her, with a conviction I prayed was true, that we were protected, surrounded by a fortress of love and vigilance. She nodded solemnly, her young face suddenly appearing older, burdened by a truth she shouldn't have to bear. Then, her voice soft, almost a whisper, she posed a question that sliced through my defenses like a shard of ice. Is that why Grandma doesn't visit? The innocence in her query. juxtaposed with the immense, complicated truth it hinted at, was a dagger to my already wounded heart. How do you explain the convoluted betrayals of adults to a child whose world should still be painted in simple, primary colors? I explained, as gently as I could, that sometimes adults make choices, difficult and hurtful choices, that fracture relationships, causing pain to everyone involved. She seemed to understand far more deeply than I had given her credit for, her eyes reflecting a wisdom that belied her years. The visitation lawsuit initiated by my mother, a relentless legal assault, dragged on with the agonizing pace of a glacier, yet with none of its serene beauty. Her lawyer, a tireless orchestrator of procedural delays, seemed to delight in filing motion after motion, each one a tiny brick adding to the insurmountable wall of stress and exhaustion that was rapidly enclosing us. Each court appearance meant not only precious time off work, compounding the financial strain, but also a renewed surge of emotional turmoil and the relentless accrual of legal bills that felt like a punishment in themselves. She sat across the courtroom, a figure who seemed to shrink with each passing week, her face etched with a desperate yearning, but her determination, a stubborn, unyielding force, never wavered. During one particularly fraught hearing, she broke protocol, her voice raw with emotion, cutting through the hushed courtroom as I passed. "I just want to see them," she cried, her plea echoing off the cold marble walls. "Please, I'm their grandmother." The bailiff, grim-faced, quietly but firmly quieted her, but her words lingered, a poignant question mark in the air. A dangerous, insidious part of me, weary and worn, began to wonder if I was being too harsh, if my resolve was perhaps too unyielding. Then, the image of her sitting beside Jack in court, a chilling tableau of complicity, flashed before my eyes, a stark reminder of her choice, her betrayal, choosing him over me, over us. Again and again, the doubt evaporated, replaced by the familiar ache of a wound that refused to heal. Summer brought with it a new, unsettling development, a fresh ripple in the seemingly endless pond of Jack's machinations. The woman from Arizona, her voice trembling with a mixture of hope and fear, called me with news Jack had made contact. He'd sent her a letter, a carefully worded missive proposing a deal strikingly similar to the one my mother had dangled before me, photos of her children, a tangible link to her lost past, in exchange for a promise of peace, a fragile truce in a war that had raged for years. She was considering it, her voice betraying the exhaustion that had become our shared and wanted companion. "Don't," I pleaded, my voice sharp with the bitter clarity of experience. "Please, don't. He's a master manipulator, a predator who preys on vulnerability. It never ends with just photos, not with Jack. That's merely the bait, the first concession. He'll always want more, demanding pieces of your soul until there's nothing left." But I heard the deep, bone-weary exhaustion in her voice, a mirroring of the profound weariness that had settled deep within my own bones. How long, I mused, could any of us, these scattered survivors, maintain this relentless, soul-crushing vigilance without simply breaking? Sarah, ever the pragmatist, ever the warrior, took the initiative. She organized a conference call, a digital gathering of the fractured pieces of our collective nightmare, bringing together all the survivors she'd managed to find. 12 women, geographically dispersed across 8 different states, yet intimately connected by the insidious threads of Jack's cruelty, each bearing the scars of similar, heartbreaking stories. We compared notes, shared the bitter lessons learned, exchanged strategies for coping with the relentless psychological warfare, and discussed the daunting prospect of forming a formal advocacy group, a collective voice against the silent suffering. There was undeniable power in numbers, a sense of solidarity that was both comforting and empowering, but beneath it all lay a deep, pervasive sadness. A communal grief for the sheer volume of suffering that one man had inflicted. One woman, her voice brittle with regret, recounted her own cautionary tale. Years ago, she had given in to Jack's demands, hoping to appease the monster. She sent photos, allowed meticulously supervised visits, desperately tried to maintain a fragile peace, a semblance of normalcy. But Jack, a master of psychological erosion, had cunningly used that access, those seemingly benign interactions, to gradually poison her daughter's mind against her, to twist the narrative until the mother became the villain. Now her daughter lived with Jack, utterly convinced of her mother's supposed treachery. Her story, a harrowing testament to Jack's enduring malice, solidified my resolve, reinforcing the ironclad walls I had built around my own children. Emma's birthday approached, a milestone that should have been purely joyous, but was now tinged with a familiar anxiety. I planned a small party, a carefully curated guest list of only our closest friends and a few trusted families who understood the silent war we were waging. The morning of, just as the sun began to paint the sky, a delivery arrived. A large, innocuous-looking box with no returned address, a silent harbinger of dread. My husband, his senses heightened by our shared trauma, intercepted it before Emma could even glimpse its sinister contents. Inside, nestled amidst layers of tissue paper, was an exquisitely crafted, undeniably expensive dollhouse, a miniature mansion that any little girl would adore. But it was no innocent gift. Tucked into one of its tiny, ornate windows was a card, written in Jack's unmistakable hand. "Every princess needs a castle. Happy birthday, sweetheart." It was a message dripping with insidious intent, a twisted, possessive declaration disguised as affection, a chilling reminder that he was still watching, still reaching. We photographed everything for evidence, documenting every detail of this violation. Then, with a profound sense of defilement, we destroyed it. Emma, thankfully, never knew celebrating with her friends, her laughter echoing with an innocent joy, utterly unaware of the malevolent shadow that had tried to touch her special day. The investigation, no longer confined to local jurisdictions, had officially expanded its reach, becoming an international endeavor. The FBI, their resources vast and their agents relentless, had become deeply involved due to the insidious interstate nature of Jack's crimes, which now stretched across multiple borders like a poisonous vine. An agent, a sharp-eyed woman with an air of quiet determination, visited our home, meticulously reviewing our evidence, poring over every detail, asking detailed, probing questions that dug into the very fabric of our lives. They were building a case, she assured us, a meticulously constructed legal fortress that would stick like superglue when they finally apprehended him. He's made mistakes, the agent assured us, her voice a steady, calming balm, though her eyes held a glint of the tireless vigilance required for such a pursuit. The video, those clandestine money transfers, the very network he painstakingly constructed, it all leaves faint but indelible trails, like breadcrumbs leading us closer. We will find him, her words were meant to soothe, to inject confidence, yet a cold dread still clung to the edges of my optimism. But weeks bled into months with agonizingly little progress. Jack, it seemed, was a quick study. He had learned from his past missteps, meticulously covering his tracks, weaving a tighter, more impenetrable web of deceit. The agent's calls became less frequent, their updates sparser, the silence between them growing louder. The case, despite being technically active, was growing cold, a chilling echo of the elusive monster we hunted. My husband, ever the protector, ever seeking a path to safety, suggested we consider moving. His company, a global entity, had offices in London, Singapore, Sydney, far-flung outposts across the world. We could vanish, start fresh somewhere Jack couldn't possibly reach. A blank slate and tainted by his shadow. But the very thought of running felt like surrender, a concession to his malevolent power. And even then, there was no ironclad guarantee he wouldn't somehow follow, a persistent phantom. Emma, her ears surprisingly attuned to the hushed conversations of adults, overheard us discussing it one night. I don't want to move, she stated from the doorway, her voice resolute, her young face etched with an unexpected maturity. My friends are here, my life is here. She was right. We couldn't let Jack steal more from us than he already had, couldn't allow him to dictate the very geography of our existence. The fake counselor's prison communications, a desperate attempt to leverage any remaining connections, were rigorously monitored, a silent hope that he might inadvertently contact Jack, revealing his hideout. Instead, a chilling letter arrived, delivered not by Marcus himself, but through the sterile conduit of his lawyer. It was a calculated gambit, a transparent manipulation. Marcus, from his prison cell, claimed to possess vital, perhaps even definitive, information regarding Jack's elusive location. But of course, there was a price, a grotesque quid pro quo, my explicit support for his parole, an endorsement that felt like a betrayal of justice itself, in exchange for the truth he held hostage. Seb, our legal advisor, strongly advised against engaging with such a transparent manipulation, warning of the treacherous waters of such a deal. But desperation, a gnawing, insidious beast, made me consider it, just for a fleeting moment. My husband, ever my grounding force, talked me down from the precipice of that dark thought. His voice a calm reminder that Marcus had already proven himself to be nothing more than a pathological liar and a master manipulator, incapable of genuine redemption. Fall arrived with the bittersweet rhythm of school starting again. Emma, now a poised and thoughtful young lady, entered middle school, a transition that would have been stressful enough without the added, omnipresent concerns that clung to our family like a shroud. We met with administrators, meticulously establishing new security protocols, providing updated photos of Jack and any known associates, an endless task of fortifying our world. And Tyler, our innocent, inquisitive youngest, had started asking unsettling questions, his small voice echoing the larger, unspoken fears that permeated our home. Why? We had always been so meticulously careful, hadn't we? It was why we found ourselves compulsively checking the locks on our doors not just once, but multiple times, every single night, a ritual board of annoying fear that had become our shadow. Our vigilance, however, couldn't shield every facet of our lives. Their childhood innocence, once vibrant and carefree, was now just another casualty of Jack's relentless, cruel campaign. Then, as if the weight of it all wasn't enough, came the devastating news. My mother had suffered a heart attack. My sister's voice, strained and urgent, sliced through the quiet of my day. She called from the hospital, painting a picture of fragility. Mom was stable, thankfully, but terribly weak, her spirit dimmed. She'd been asking for me, a faint, desperate plea for her grandchildren echoing in the sterile hospital air. My sister, her voice thick with emotion, practically begged me to come, her words a desperate plea. This might be our last chance for reconciliation, she'd insisted, laying the burden of potential regret squarely on my shoulders. I drove to the hospital, but couldn't bring myself to go inside immediately. Instead, I sat in my car in the quiet hum of the parking lot for what felt like an eternity, an entire hour locked in a silent, agonizing debate with myself. Every past hurt, every wrong choice she'd made, every instance of her complicity or inaction, warred with the primal urge to see my dying mother. My husband, ever the silent anchor, waited patiently beside me, his presence a comfort, never pushing me one way or another. Finally, after that internal battlefield had quieted, I went in, alone, bracing myself. She looked so incredibly fragile in that stark hospital bed, a stark contrast to the woman I remembered. Oxygen tubes, thin as threads, snaked into her nose, a visible sign of her struggle. Her eyes, clouded with a lifetime of regrets and, now perhaps, genuine remorse, filled with tears the moment she saw me. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely a breath, "for everything I chose wrong." I see that now. Could I truly believe her? Was this a deathbed confession, or another plea for absolution cloaked in self-pity? Trust had been shattered too many times between us, a mosaic of broken promises and unaddressed pain, making it almost impossible to truly let her words in. I told her, my voice measured and distant, that I hoped she recovered, but I couldn't promise her anything more than that, couldn't offer the comfort or closeness she sought. She nodded, a subtle tremor in her head, and seemed to age further before my eyes, the weight of her acknowledgement visibly pressing down on her. As I turned to leave, her voice, surprisingly clear despite its weakness, called out. "He contacts me sometimes," she revealed, the words hanging in the air like a sudden, unexpected twist. "From Mexico. I could help you find him." I stopped dead at the door, my hand on the cold metal, but I didn't turn around. The offer was a tantalizing bait, yet the bitterness of years ran too deep. "You've helped him enough," I said, a blade of bitter truth, and walked out, leaving her behind. That very night, the FBI agent called, his voice calm but purposeful. My mother, in a sudden, seismic shift of loyalty, had already reached out to them, offering her full cooperation. It was impossible to say with certainty whether this 11th-hour change of heart stemmed from a genuine pang of remorse, a desperate gamble for redemption, or merely the raw, primal fear of dying utterly alone, a final, lonely consequence of her past choices. But whatever her motivation, she was finally choosing a side. Her information, a treasure trove of digital breadcrumbs and financial trails, proved invaluable. She provided email addresses Jack had used to evade detection, phone numbers he discarded and picked up again, and crucial details about his shadowy financial resources, all meticulously compiled. With this fresh infusion of leads, the investigation, which had felt stagnant and frustratingly slow, renewed with a palpable, almost electric energy. Life, in its relentless way, continued to unfurl, bringing with it moments of unexpected joy and poignant normalcy. Emma's school play, a vibrant explosion of youthful talent, open to a packed auditorium, every seat filled with proud parents and eager friends. I sat in the front row, a knot of mingled pride and apprehension in my stomach. My husband, ever the diligent documentarian, recorded every beaming smile and perfectly delivered line, while my eyes, almost instinctively, ceaselessly scanned the crowd. A practiced ritual of maternal anxiety, searching for any hint of danger. But then, as Emma, a beacon of unaffected joy, delivered her lines with flawless grace, basking in the warm glow of the stage lights, a rare, precious gift unfolded. For a moment, just for a moment, I completely forgot to be afraid. Afterward, amidst the joyful chaos of the cast party, Emma pulled me aside, her young face serious beyond her years. "Mom," she said, her voice soft but resolute, "I know you're scared for me. My heart caught in my throat, but I'm okay. We're okay. Don't let him take this from us, too." In that instant, my 12-year-old daughter, with her quiet, unwavering resolve, displayed a profound wisdom, a depth of understanding and courage that I hadn't fully realized she possessed. Then, just as the investigation began to gain traction, the true breakthrough arrived from an utterly unexpected source. Jack's current wife, a woman living under the same suffocating web of manipulation and fear that we had endured, contacted Sarah. She had found our online support group, a digital lifeline forged through shared trauma, and immediately recognized the terrifying, insidious pattern of his behavior. He was controlling, obsessively suspicious, and profoundly paranoid, a chillingly consistent portrait of the man who had tormented us. She desperately wanted out, but her fear for her children's safety, a primal instinct I understood all too well, held her captive. We immediately arranged a conference call, connecting across continents. She was in Mexico City, she confirmed, where she had been living for the past 2 years. Jack, she revealed, was working in private security, a bitter irony. He was using the very skills he developed stalking and surveilling us, his perverse talents for intrusion and control to protect wealthy clients. The twisted application of his expertise wasn't lost on any of us. Desperate for a way out, she agreed to cooperate fully with authorities in exchange for comprehensive protection for herself and her children. Within mere days of her confession, the net began to tighten with breathtaking speed. Mexican federal police had Jack's apartment under discreet surveillance, every window and doorway watched. The FBI, working seamlessly in coordination with local authorities, meticulously built an airtight case, compiling an overwhelming dossier of evidence. That night, the night of the planned arrest, sleep was an impossible dream. Emma and Tyler, oblivious to the impending operation, were safely tucked away at a friend's house, just in case. My husband and I sat together on the couch, side by side, our phones clutched in our hands, every nerve-ending taut, waiting for news that would change everything. The call finally came at dawn, a low, urgent hum. They had arrested Jack without incident. He had been sleeping, seemingly confident in his absolute safety, a chilling testament to his delusion. What they found within his apartment was horrifying, irrefutable evidence of his surveillance on multiple families, not just ours, along with meticulously detailed plans for future harassment and revenge, and comprehensive, chillingly personal files on all of us. Extradition, the agent cautioned, would inevitably take time, winding its way through international legal channels, but he was in custody. He was caught. The agent assured me, his voice firm, that Jack would be held without bail, a crucial detail given his history as an extreme flight risk. It was then, in that moment of profound, undeniable certainty, that the dam finally broke. I cried then, really cried, a torrent of pent-up grief, anger, and relief that had been building for months, for years. My husband held me tightly, a silent, comforting anchor as years of unbearable tension finally, physically, released from my body. It wasn't over, not entirely. There would be trials, testimony, more legal battles stretching ahead, but he was caught. He could no longer hurt us. We picked up the kids that morning, their faces bright and unsuspecting, and with carefully chosen words, told them the bad man had finally been arrested. Emma, her eyes wide with a mixture of hope and a lingering shadow of fear, hugged me tightly. Does this mean we can stop being scared? She asked, her heartbreaking query echoing years of unspoken terror. I held her close, stroking her hair. We can start, I said, a cautious but hopeful promise of a new beginning. 2 weeks later, my mother passed away. Despite everything, the complicated history, the pain she had caused and allowed, I attended her funeral. My sister, sensing the profound emotional landscape, understood why I didn't bring the children, shielding them from the complexities of a legacy they didn't need to bear. I stood there, saying goodbye to the woman who should have protected me, the woman who chose wrong until it was almost too late. In my heart, I forgave her, a fragile truce with the past, even if I knew I could never truly forget. Jack's extradition, as predicted, moved with the ponderous slowness of international courts, a bureaucratic dance of legalities. Meanwhile, his wife, empowered by her newfound freedom, filed for divorce and full custody of her children, severing her ties to his dark world. She joined our support network, another survivor finding her voice and her strength. We helped her navigate the labyrinthine legal system we knew all too well, passing on our hard-won wisdom. In our own lives, a quiet rebuilding began. Emma, with a renewed sense of confidence, auditioned for the spring musical and, to her utter delight, landed the lead role. Tyler, embracing a new chapter of boyish exuberance, joined Little League, his days now filled with the joyous chaos of dirt and teamwork. My husband and I, making a conscious effort to reconnect and rekindle the spark that fear had dimmed, started our date nights again. Slowly, carefully, painstakingly, like piecing together a shattered stained glass window, we began to rebuild our normal. The trial date was finally set for summer, a looming challenge. I would have to testify, face Jack again, but this time, the prospect, the daunting, was tempered by a profound sense of solidarity. I wouldn't be alone. Sarah would be there, and the woman from Arizona, and countless others who had found courage in our shared strength, forming a formidable wall of collective resolve. Emma, with a fierce protective instinct, even asked if she could testify. I want to tell them he doesn't get to hurt our family anymore, she declared, a nascent advocate for justice. After careful discussion with her therapist and us, we decided together that she would provide a powerful written statement instead, giving her a voice while protecting her from the direct confrontation. I still check the locks, often more than once, my fingers tracing the cold metal. I still watch the rearview mirror, my eyes darting, assessing. I still jump at unexpected sounds, my heart quickening with an ingrained vigilance. Maybe these small rituals of hyper-awareness, etched into my very being, will always be a part of me. But now, nestled within those lingering shadows, I also watch Emma sing on stage, her voice clear and strong, a testament to her resilience. I help Tyler with his homework, his small hand in mine, guiding him through equations. I kiss my husband goodnight, a tender moment of connection, without fear stealing every precious second, without its icy grip suffocating all joy. Jack took years from us, precious, irreplaceable years, but he didn't take everything. He plundered moments, but he couldn't claim our spirits. We survived. We're healing. We are, finally, truly free. The last photo in our family album, a vivid, cherished memory, captures us at Emma's musical. There she is, radiant in her costume, Tyler perched on my hip, my husband's arm strong and comforting around us all. We're smiling, a genuine, unadulterated happiness radiating from our faces. Behind us, the auditorium is full, not just with strangers, but with our community, the people who stood by us, a tapestry of kindness and unwavering support. That's the image I choose to remember, a conscious act of mental architecture, building a new foundation of joy. Not the fear, not the endless custody battles or the restraining orders, not the sleepless nights haunted by shadows, but this, a moment of pure, unblemished freedom.